Councilmember Cohen.
Here.
Councilmember Myers.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Bogosian.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Nicole. First item, citizens' comments.
Mr. Nessler.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gary Nessler, 1720 Second Avenue. I'm going to share with you just a couple of pieces of data from the city budget. We're dealing with this compensation issue for firefighters and police officers. I'm going to call it a stabilization plan. It comes from the city budget, the employee separation data, state research on firefighter training and turnover economics, the latest evergreen study, and the IOP Professional Firefighters Association Town Hall meeting that was held recently. Thank you, Jimmy Ward and Rusty Streetman, for attending. I also want to give acknowledgement to Scott Pierce for acknowledging the fact in the last administration meeting that the city is way off your words. The market and Janice Ladd for confirming that IOP did not provide COLA in the last 2 years, and that wasn't considered in the latest evergreen study. So, to net it out, I believe IOP is already spending what it would cost to stabilize pay. IOP is funding a compensation system that's built on overtime and turnover instead of just stable salaries and retention. It's not whether we can pay it, it's how we can pay it. So I'm going to ask you to lean on your leadership skills and creativity because each one of you are well experienced. So categorically, if you look at the 25 budget, $2.6 million went to firefighter salaries, about $450,000, give or take, went to overtime. If you look at the unprecedented turnover rate that we have here from the fire department alone, 12 months, 12 people left, which in 3 years, 36 people left. That's a whole department's operations. We had extreme early departures documented 3 days, 21 days, 7 months and 14 days, 10 months, 21 days, 1 year, 3 months and 22 days. The annual turnover cost for five firefighters, it's about $220,000 on, give or take, depending upon the information that's been presented thus far. 12 firefighters, if they leave, it's between $400,000 and $500,000. To train just one firefighter is about $45,000, depending on benefits, training, academic, and tuition pay, turnout gear, full PPE, et cetera. So if you look at overtime, just by saving 40% of overtime costs, you can save around $175,000. If that leads to turnover prevention with 5 departures, that probably gives you another $175,000 to $200,000. If you look at preventing 12 departures, you're looking at about $420,000 to $500,000. So that's a big number. So when I looked at the recent information, I got it, Nicole, thank you. Just a couple more seconds. If you look at what has been offered as 11% raise to the firefighters, 7.3%, that's incomprehensible to make a living. So what's being requested is take a look at the 31% utilizing the information that has been presented, or up to 38%. So the net result, if you go 31%, maybe it'll cost the city about 20 grand. If you look at 38%, maybe it'll cost the city another $150,000 to $200,000. My final comment is the following. I would ask you to establish a public safety advocacy committee so you can access people who have industry experience, such as myself, over 30 years actually, 16 on the Isle of Palms. Be more than happy to sit down and share all the data with you guys. But this is not about politics. It's about people's lives, not only the ones who are coming to our aid, but basically ours as well as citizens. And the government, to Philip Pounds, the mayor, who out there said that the priority, number one priority, I think it was 1A priority, was public safety. So we're going to ask you to consider your statement is very serious. So paying firefighters $25 an hour, whatever the case may be, to get up there, we have the money, we can do it. And I would encourage you to also consider inviting the police department and the Isle of Palms Professional Firefighters Association to the upcoming town hall. My last comment is when we need help,
Dr. Ness.
we call 911. My comment. When we need help, we call 911. If you have a creative way, citizens of this island would be more than happy to pay 0.911 cents every day. It'll come out to $332 per household, 4,400 households on the average. That's $1.4 million. It's another creative way. We have creative ways to do it, but we also have it in the budget. So thank you for your time and appreciate it. And welcome to council.
Ms. Patsy Hyman.
just talk, but I wrote it out today in the interest of time. I'm Patsy Heineman, 7 Barnacle Road. In 1981, Ronald Reagan said, government's first duty is to protect the people, not run their lives. Council talks a lot about how to run our lives. We don't hear so much about how to protect us. What do we need to protect us? We need a police department and a fire department that are staffed with an appropriate number of well-trained, preferably experienced employees. And having that depends on recruitment and retention. Recruitment requires salaries that make people want to come here to go to work. Retention requires salaries that make people want to stay here and keep on working. This city has a problem with both. As Gary said, the fire department has lost 30 employees in the past 3 years, 12 in 2005. That's the equivalent to 1 full shift. We have positions for 6 EMTs. I don't think we've ever filled but 3 of those positions. And rumor on the street has it that 2 of those 3 are actively looking for jobs elsewhere. That shouldn't surprise you when you know that the starting salary is $49,000 or $17.68 per hour. EMTs are starting a little over $20 an hour. That's barely above the poverty level in Charleston County. If you don't believe me, check it out. Today, council will hear from the compensation study that y'all paid for. This study does acknowledge that many Isle of Palms employees are underpaid. For our firefighters, the study recommends a starting salary that will put Isle of Palms on a par with 60% of the cities that were surveyed by this compensation study. That's just not acceptable. Can you imagine your child coming home and saying, hey, I've studied enough, I know I can get a D. And you say, that's fine, as long as you can guarantee me a D, you don't have to study anymore. Or would you hire a beach renourishment company that tells you they can replenish 60% of the sand, but the other 40%, no, it's a goner. I don't think you would deal with that. It's simply not enough. If what we're talking about, the 60% level, it represents an 8% increase, which takes us up from $17.68 to $19.10, if my math is correct. That's simply not enough to change the current problem. The Firefighters Association is asking for $25 an hour. They don't just deserve that, they need it to have a decent living. And as you start working on the next budget, I really encourage you to think about paying them $25 an hour. If you can't vote for that, you should know that they are probably going to be at home working on their resumes and putting their letters of recommendation together so that they can go somewhere to a city that shows their appreciation for their public servants by how much they pay them. Can we afford to pay this? Absolutely, we can afford it. We're about to fork over millions of dollars for our beach restoration. I think we can find a little bit more to stop the erosion of our public servants.
Ms. Tammy.
What we cannot afford is continuing to pay the low salaries that cause our employees to move on to other cities, leaving Isle of Palms with vacancies that we cannot fill. So I encourage you to do the right thing, listen to the Isle of Palms Firefighters Association, and think about $25 an hour. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Carolyn Anderson, 3 Oyster Row. You're getting a copy of what Rusty and Jimmy Ward have already seen. This is from the Firefighters Association. As a physician, I'm concerned, obviously, about the wealth and health of our island residents and also the visitors. I understand one of the primary roles of government, as Patsy has said, is to keep the citizens safe. We are losing our first responders, as you see, at an accelerated rate. And I understand that we're about to lose 2 more paramedics, leaving us very short-staffed. We have 5 firemen for each of the 2 houses, and we will be down to 1 paramedic, and we have 3 shifts for paramedics. We worked hard to get that paramedic group here, and I hate to see them where they're really put in jeopardy. The first responders have to work extra jobs to pay for their living expenses, sometimes in excess of 80 hours per week. And they have to travel a great distance to get here, usually 45 minutes to an hour, before they can come and take care of our lives. And this is something that should be compensated. The problem is we've had too many people with disposable money move to the Isle of Palms, and none of these people can afford to even live close to where we are. Please pay our great responders so that they can afford to do what they do for us, and we can staff adequately our 2 firehouses and hopefully retain our paramedics. This puts us in harm's way and everyone on the island who comes to visit at risk. There's a problem with recruiting, as Patsy has said, and retaining these competent guardians of our community if their pay scale doesn't match the surrounding communities. I would highly recommend that you go with Jimmy Ward's recommendations of at least 70%, and I believe he said 90% would be really wonderful. For the firefighters and the other people who take care of us, this is a 90% of the mean salaries of the surrounding municipalities. We're about to spend a lot of money on dumping sand on our beach. Is our safety less important than grains of sand? Thank you.
Ms. Marks?
I don't speak in public very often. I'm very nervous, so forgive me. I represent myself and my 2 fellow employees in the building department, Jeannie Garrett and Rachel Jones. And I want to make it very clear that we first fully support the firemen, the police, the first responders over any other pay. But I'm going to read you the letter that we sent in an email today. After watching the recent Administrative Committee meeting on Tuesday, March 3rd, we feel compelled to share our concern regarding the wage study discussion. First and foremost, we want to be clear that we wholeheartedly support competitive and fair compensation for our public safety employees. The work performed by police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel is critical to the safety and well-being of our community, and they absolutely deserve to be paid well for the risk and responsibilities they carry. However, we respectfully ask that you not forget about the general government employees who also serve the city of Isle of Palms every single day. These employees are the individuals working behind the scenes to ensure the city operates smoothly, whether that be managing its finances, processing permits, maintaining records, coordinating services, supporting residents, and handling the countless administrative responsibilities that keep our local government functioning effectively. Like public safety personnel, general government employees are dedicated public servants. We show up each day committed to serving this community with professionalism, care, and integrity. We also have families who depend on us, and we also face rising costs of living, increasing healthcare expenses, and the everyday financial pressures that affect households across the region. To hear that pay increases for general government employees may be tabled for a second time is deeply disheartening. It sends a message that our work is less valued or less essential. While our roles may not always be as visible, they are no less important to the success and stability of the city. A well-run government requires strong public safety departments and strong administrative and operational support. One cannot function effectively without the other. Delaying these increases, again, risks more than disappointment. It risks morale, retention, and the city's ability to attract and keep qualified professionals. When employees feel overlooked, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain the high level of service that Isle of Palms residents expect and deserve. We respectfully urge you to consider a balanced approach that recognizes and values all city employees. Fair compensation should not be viewed as either-or proposition. Supporting public safety and supporting general government staff are both investments in the strength, stability, and future of our community. We simply ask that as you move forward, you remember the full team of employees who work diligently to serve Isle of Palms every day. And I do want to repeat, we fully respect and prioritize the first responders' salary increases over our own. We just don't want to be forgotten. So, thank you.
That's all.
Did it? Thank you. Thank you all. Next item, speaking of topic, is a special presentation, wage and compensation study from Allie Crumpler from Evergreen. This will be the first time full council has had the opportunity to see some of the data, assuming and there she is. Douglas, any opening or?
No, Ally, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, got you loud and clear. You can go ahead, Ally, when you're ready. Thank you.
Let me share my screen here. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, my name is Ellie Crumpler. I am a senior consultant here with Evergreen Solutions. Very excited to present the results of our study to you. So an overview of what we'll talk about tonight. So we'll talk about study goals. So why do a compensation study? We'll talk about the internal and external reviews, or the analyses that Evergreen has been doing for the city as part of this study. We'll talk about the subsequent recommendations that Evergreen is making to the city as a result of those analyses. We'll talk next steps, and then I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. Starting with study goals, so why do a compensation study? I'm sure you are all well aware that your greatest asset are your employees, and we want to make sure that the city is in a place where they are able to both recruit and retain their top-tier talent. To do this, we start with an internal review. So we do that by completing what's called an assessment of current conditions, where we review the current classification and compensation system that is in place within the city to review your internal equity. We also complete an external review, so we survey peer organizations to maintain a check on your external equity. And then, based on those two analyses, we produce recommendations to provide the city with a system that will be more equitable both internally and externally moving forward. So if we start with that assessment of current conditions, so really this allows us to get an understanding of the current status of the system that is in place, strengths and weaknesses of that system, and really provides the baseline for our recommendations from a data standpoint. So I do want to point out that this is a snapshot in time as of November of 2025 when the study started. So we know that HR data is not static, so that has likely changed over time. But if we look at this as a snapshot as of November, at that time the city was operating under 4 salary schedules that are based on functional groups. Those salary schedules are administrative, fire, general employees, and then police. The public safety plans, so for fire and police, are step plans, meaning that you have a minimum starting salary and maximum earning salary, and then there are set increments or steps that employees move through to get closer to that maximum over time. Your general and administrative plans are open range plans, which means that you still have that minimum starting and that maximum earning salary, and then they are more open to moving in between those two parameters. Overall, looking at your plans, they are consistent in design regarding midpoint progressions and range spread. So a midpoint progression is the distance between the midpoint of one pay grade to the midpoint of the next pay grade. So consistency there, which is great. That allows for upward progression and mobility as employees are looking to promote. And then consistent range spread. So a range spread is the distance from your minimum starting salary to the maximum earning salary, or really the earning potential for positions in each pay grade. Consistent across your plans, which is also great, which means that employees do have equitable earning potential across those plans. If we take a look at salary distribution within your pay plans currently, looking at the employees situated within your plans, your overall average tenure for included employees is roughly 9.5 years, so you do have some good longer tenure folks within the city, but your median tenure is only 3.8 years. So this is looking at, if we look at where the majority of your employees are concentrated, would be closer to that 4-year mark. So you do have some longer tenured employees that are pushing that average up just a little bit. If we look at where employees are concentrated within his or her pay range, roughly 75% of your employees are compensated below the midpoint of his or her pay range, which makes sense if we're looking at the majority of them being concentrated around that 4 or 5 year mark. That would make sense that the majority of them would be in the beginning portions of their pay range. However, you do have 3 employees that are currently compensated above your published maximum. So this just suggests us that maybe those maximums do need to be updated. You have a few employees that are getting close to or exceeding those maximums, so maybe we need to update those and maybe widen those range grids for some employees. If we look at a quartile analysis, so breaking each pay range into 4 equal parts and looking where employees are concentrated, you can see that your largest concentration of employees is within the first quartile, or the first 25% of a pay range. But overall, your average tenure does increase as we move throughout those quartiles. So that does suggest there is a relationship between what an employee is paid in the city and how long they have been with the city, which is great. Overall, average tenure in quartile 1, or the first 25% of a pay range, is roughly 3.3 years. If we look at quartile 2, so 25 to 50% of a pay range, average tenure is roughly 9.1 years. Quartile 3, or 50 to 75% of the pay range, average tenure is roughly 14.7 years. And then quartile 4, or the last 25% of the pay range, average tenure is roughly 22 years. So we do have a good relationship there across all of your pay grades on average. However, there are 4 pay grades where tenure decreases as you go through those quartiles. So likely due to the city hiring further into the range to get quality candidates, giving advanced credit for degrees, experience, things like that. But it also does suggest that you may be experiencing some compression between newly hired and more tenured employees on a small scale. If we take a look at actual salary versus projected salary within a current salary range, you can see that the majority of your employees, so roughly 89% of your employees, are making within 10% of where a model would expect that they would be paid based on their time in their current position. But we do have roughly 8% of employees that are making more than 10% of where a model would expect that they would be placed in their current salary range. And this may be, again, as I mentioned before, that you are hiring further into that range to stay more competitive with your market, or placing them further based on performance, higher credentials, things like that. This is where data only tells us one side of the story. But it is important to note that 100% of those employees that are being placed further into the range are within their first 5 years of their position. So this tells us that your minimums may need to be updated because you're not hiring employees at those minimum salaries. Moving on to your external review, so looking at your market analysis. So we do this to check for competitive compensation by comparing your positions to your market peers. And this allows us to identify and address inconsistencies or disparities in your pay across similar positions. For that, we're looking at the roles and responsibilities of each position and not just the job title, since it may be called something else or something different in a different area. But we do also adjust everything for a cost of living, since we are looking at peers outside of your immediate demographic area, so it may have a different cost of living than the city of Isle of Palms. If we look at the peers that were selected for analysis, so we did solicit information from 20 peers, and we received a response from 18 peers that are shown here. So you can see that several of these peers are outside of your immediate area. Some of them are much larger than the city. Some of them are similarly sized. But we did choose these peers in conjunction with your leadership team as ones that you are either competing with for quality employees, or they have a similar size, structure, or offerings to that of the city. If we look at the metrics of the data that we received within that market analysis, we did receive a response from 90% of the peers that we solicited data from. We did include all Isle of Palms positions, so those were roughly 42, and I think there may have been 1 or 2 that the city may be looking at to include within their plan in the future, so we also benchmarked that. We did receive sufficient matches for inclusion on roughly 83% of your classifications. So what I mean by that is that when we are benchmarking data, we are looking for at least 5 quality matches on those roles and responsibilities. If we don't receive at least 5 matches, we would say that that is not statistically relevant, and we would exclude that from the analysis. We would also exclude a match if it is more than a 40% differential from how the city is currently paying that position. So while we do match it based on roles and responsibilities, and we felt that it was a good match in that respect, if your peer is paying either 40% more or 40% less for that position, there's something about how that position is being valued at that peer level that we aren't aware of from a data standpoint, so we would exclude that match as well. Overall, we were able to make more than 320 quality matches for your positions and have an average match count of roughly 7.5 per position. So we're looking at a pretty good, robust data set here for you. If we look at overall, position or overall standpoint within the market, this is for your general and your administrative positions. And I want to note here that we're looking at average pay range, so we're not looking at average actual salaries. There's a lot of data that goes into determining an individual employee's salaries that we would not be aware of. So we are looking at just pay ranges here and comparing your pay range at the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum to that of your market peers at the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum. So on the left-hand side here, you have the average. So if we did straight averages, no adjustments for cost of living, just your dollar in comparison to that of your market peers, you can see that for your general and your administrative positions, at the minimum, you are roughly 5% below across all of those positions that were surveyed. If we push it to the midpoint, so the midpoint of your pay ranges on average for your general and administrative positions are roughly 6% below. And then if we look at the maximum, so the maximum of your pay ranges on average are roughly 6.8 to 7% below that of your market peers on average. If we switch over to the right side and look at the 50th percentile, so 50th percentile is the median of your market. So if you think about it in terms of a bell curve, that would put you right in the middle of those market peers. Half of your peers would be paying more than you, half of your peers would be paying less than you. You can see that adjusting for cost of living and distribution along that bell curve, so for your general and administrative positions at the minimum, you're about 8.5% below. If we look at the midpoint, the midpoint of your pay range in comparison to that of your market peers, you're roughly 9% below. And at the maximum, so the maximum of your pay ranges on average in relation to your market peers, you're roughly 9.7% below. So you can see that we lose ground going from the minimum starting salary to the maximum earning salary on average because your range spread, so again, if you recall, a range spread is the distance from the minimum starting salary to the maximum earning salary, or the earning potential for your positions. Your range spreads are slightly narrower than that of your market peers, so you are losing a little bit of ground going from the minimums to the maximums. If we switch over and look at your public safety positions, you are not quite as far behind the market in relation to your general and administrative positions. Again, if we look at straight averages, and again, we're looking at pay ranges in comparison to pay ranges here. So on average, dollar for dollar here at the minimum, so roughly 2.5% below. If we look at the midpoint, so the average midpoint for your positions in relation to your market peers, you're roughly 4.7% below. And then at the maximums of your pay ranges are roughly 6% below that of your market peers. Again, if we adjust those numbers for cost of living, adding in those cost of living numbers, and then distribution along that bell curve, you can see that it actually helps you a little bit with this subset of data. So at the 50th percentile, at the median of your market in relation to those market peers, you're roughly 1.4% below at the minimums. At the midpoint, you're roughly 4% below. And then at the maximum, the average maximum for your pay ranges in relation to your market peers is roughly 6% below. So again, you're still losing that ground going from the minimum to the maximum because your ranges are slightly narrower than that of your market peers. So taking all of that data into account, we do have some recommendations for the city. Our recommendations are to implement updated pay plans for your general, public safety, and administrative employees. We would recommend that the city assign all positions or classifications to pay grades based on internal and external equity, and then implement those new plans using a defined implementation strategy. So this is the proposed pay plan for your general employees. So we are proposing a minimum start of $41,600. You can see that we have consistent range spreads of 50%, and then grade progressions of 7.5% per grade. So this is looking at, there's a 7.5% difference between the midpoint of one pay grade to the midpoint of the next pay grade. So this is actually the same structure as your current plan. It has just been updated for an increased competitive start for your minimum positions, and then all of your other pay grades have been adjusted accordingly. If we look at your proposed pay plan for fire, so again, a consistent range spread of 40% between each grade, and an average grade progression of 11% between each grade. And then we have a 1.4% step progression between each step within your plan. So if you recall, I mentioned that your public safety plans are step plans. So this 1.4% progression is based on a 40% range spread and 25 steps. There would be 1.4% between each step within the plan. I did want to note that this proposed plan is based at the 60th percentile of the market. So 50th percentile puts you in the median of all of those market peers that were surveyed. 60th percentile pushes you a little bit further along that bell curve, making you a little bit more competitive. I did want to note that this is 60th percentile on average across all of the positions that are included within your fire plan. This proposed minimum for your firefighters in grade F1 of the 53,045 is closer to the 77th percentile of your market. Moving on, looking at your police plan, so across all of the positions here, so again, a standard range spread of 40%, a 10.5% grade progression between each grade, again, a 1.4% step progression, so again, 25 steps, 1.4% between each grade to get us to that 40% range spread. The last plan here is your administrative plan. So it starts with your assistant directors and it moves up through your deputy city administrators. So this is, again, maintaining the structure of your current plan, just updating these numbers to make sure that you're competitive within your market at the 50th percentile. So again, a consistent range spread of 50% here and an average grade progression of 7% between each pay grade. So once we have our proposed plan, the next item for discussion is how to move employees into those new plans. So we discussed several different options with your leadership team, and we have a few to present to you today. The first is a bring to new minimum or a closest step, which is exactly as it sounds. So this looks at making sure that all employees are at least making the new minimum of his or her pay grade. If they are already making at the new minimum, they would just be moved to the next closest step if they were on a step plan. This approach does produce more compression within the plan because it's just going to make sure that every employee is at the bottom and then no additional adjustments are made. So really we only include this because it is the basis for our other recommendations that we are showing here. So current range placement looks at where employees currently are within their pay plan and then moves them to that same place in the new plan. So if they are currently 10% above the minimum, they would be moved to 10% above the minimum in the new plan. So this would not erase any promotionary increases or merit-based increases that employees have already made and allows them to keep that same progression. This is what we are recommending for your general and your administrative employees. For public safety, we are recommending a step-to-step option. So within the new pay plans that have been updated for market competitiveness, just realigning those employees to the same step that they are currently on within the new pay scale. So for example, if an employee is on step 2, they would be placed at step 2 on the new pay scale. So unfortunately, there are costs that are associated with each of these implementation options. So as I mentioned, for your public safety employees, we are recommending that step-to-step, so just maintaining that current step placement and just updating those plans for you. So you can see that that is an average adjustment of roughly $4,900 per employee and an average percentage adjustment of about 7.3% across all of those employees that are within that group. For your general and administrative employees, we are recommending current range placement, so keeping their current placement within their range, just updating those ranges for you. That is roughly a $9,200 adjustment or roughly 11% per employee on average. For those two different approaches, the base salary estimate, and I want to stress that these are base salaries, this does not include fringe benefits or any additional markup, that is roughly $638,000. We also ran numbers for you to do a discounted range placement. So keeping, for public safety, keeping them at step to step, so those numbers would not change. But if we did a discounted range placement for your general and administrative employees and capped movement at 15% for those employees, so this just says that no employee would receive more than a 15% adjustment within their range placement unless it takes more than that to bring them to the new minimum of his or her pay grade. You can see that that adjusts your cost slightly, and that base salary estimate comes in at roughly $556,000. Further recommendations and next steps that we would recommend for the city would be to conduct a classification study to further investigate internal equity and to update your job description. So we received some feedback that some of your job descriptions have not been updated in quite some time. And, some of your roles and responsibilities may have shifted significantly. So we would recommend that the city consider conducting a classification study where we would do an in-depth analysis of the roles and responsibilities of each position and making sure that they are slotted appropriately into pay grades based on those roles, responsibilities, and risk. Otherwise, we would recommend that the city continue to conduct annual small-scale market surveys. So as you have positions that are hard to fill, where you have a lot of turnover, just make sure that you're maintaining a check on that market and adjusting pay grades as necessary for those positions. We would recommend that the city conduct a full-scale classification and compensation study every 3 to 5 years, whereas market conditions and your budget allows. And then we would also recommend that the city review compensation guidelines annually and revise those as needed. So what we mean by that is a compensation philosophy that outlines how employees will move through their pay ranges. So does a step equal a year? Is that tied to merit, especially for your open range employees? How do they move through that open range since they don't have those set increments? And then we would also recommend that the city put in place a hiring calculator or a promotional calculator. So as you're bringing new employees into the city, looking at a more objective way to place those employees within those scales, especially for your open range employees. And we will provide the city with that at the conclusion of the study and once pay plans have been finalized. But happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Just before we go, questions, Scott or anybody on the admin committee? I know y'all have seen this already and had some conversations. Anything to add?
No, I think we'll
Discussion.
hopefully get into it. Some of the questions, we can kind of cover the same ground when we get through it. We've been through the study in some level of detail, and just for everybody's information, we just got the information council last Friday. So we've had the information all of 3 days in totality, so we are digesting it. But I think there's going to be some questions about the process, and Ally, we'll open it up to questions now and then kind of go through it all again.
Yeah. And I think, Scott, to your question real quick, or your comment, we'll get into pretty good conversation tomorrow in our budget workshop for sure around how to fund and what level to go at. So questions for Ally or? Yeah, Jimmy.
The last time we looked at this, this was based on the 60 percentile. I asked about seeing some numbers for 70, 80, and even 90% percentiles. Where do we stand on that?
So we did provide information at the 70th percentile, but we can pull the 80th and 90th percentile for you.
What did she say?
We already have the 70. Yeah, the 70 was already delivered to us Friday, Jimmy.
One of the
I haven't
tabs.
seen it.
Yeah,
How
it's-
about the 80 and 90?
Yeah.
Those have not been done. Ally, can you do us a favor and kind of walk us through, I noticed on the study when I started looking at it, and one of your recommendations is conduct a classification study to further investigate internal equity and update job descriptions. When I went through the detail, and I don't think it's mentioned in here on your quantification, but it looks like about 15 positions have already been upgraded by 1 to 3 levels. As far as job classifications. And if we haven't done the classification, I'm kind of wondering how would we upgrade the job on a comparison level to another equity position for classification?
Right, so those adjustments are based solely on market currently and how.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What was that again?
So those adjustments are based solely on your market right now. But if we do a full classification study for you, we can truly dig into the roles and responsibilities, the differences between your positions. Right now, we're doing that based on your job descriptions, which may not be the most updated and may not have the most updated information as far as current roles and responsibilities.
So, for example, some of our jobs, I'm still not following, you said based on market, but if there's a job description, how does, say, a job in our department compare to one that's in either North Charleston, Myrtle Beach, or those types of positions? Because I think those were used for, when you finally gave us our matrix, I think those were the comparative cities.
Right, so we are looking solely at your listed job description for now, making those comparisons within your market. For a classification study, we would we would get feedback from your employees to review those roles and responsibilities, make sure that what you have on paper does match what those employees are doing, since some of those roles may have shifted over time. So we can reassess and make sure that we benchmark those appropriately within your market based on that new information. And then we can also compare those positions in relation to each other. We do that based on a compensatory factor basis, where we score positions in relation to each other, look at how they are placed within the pay plan based on an internal equity standpoint, and make adjustments as needed.
Yeah, go ahead.
David?
So if I followed, and I kind of was digging through a lot of your data and stuff and looking at your, in comparison, you're comparing to 5 matches based on the cities that you have, which, again, on the bottom end of the scale, I would expect, entry-level jobs to match. But as you go higher up and you start looking at, North Charleston, compared to Isle of Palms, roles and responsibilities, especially in senior positions, I don't see a very good matching at that point. So when I go back and look through, and I went through like Bureau of Labor and Standards data, and also about in 2024, the South Carolina County Associations put together a very detailed pay thing. Are you familiar with that one? And again, from at the bottom end, I see pretty good alignment with the data I've seen, but going towards the top end, it gets real disparate based on locality, size of the city, and I was wondering if that was compensated for in the matches that you have, that you're doing the comparison.
And when you say disparities, in what respect?
Like pay disparities between similar type jobs, like, I'll use the city administrator, sorry. Isle of Palms versus city administrator at the city of Charleston, I would not expect the descriptions to be even closely aligned. So how does that affect in the market survey that you did? How was that accounted for?
Right, so we would never expect a one-to-one match across municipalities, right? You guys have very unique, and especially an organization of your size, your positions are wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of different things. So for those matches, we are looking at best comparisons and at least a 70% match on those roles and responsibilities. Sometimes that for cities that are a larger size than you, that may be spread across 2 positions. But where that is, we would note that, and sometimes we have averaged positions together to get that data for your position.
David, is that?
And again, my mind is when I was kind of trying to do that and looking at cities similar size to us, salaries, and again, a lot of this data is public data. I just did not see that lining up with the Evergreen study, and since I didn't have the background of where those numbers were coming from, I got some questions with them.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I guess similar comments that David has. The whole wage study and the whole intent was to do a market study to see where we compared the surrounding area. And I think that's the premise for any recommendations or changes that you have here. And I think, for fire and police, as long as it doesn't have a chief in front of it, I think I'm good with the pay grade. I think to David's point, though, assistant city administrator in Charleston is not the same as our assistant city administrator. Our fire chief in Charleston is not the same as our fire chief. And there's some limit that the scope and the roles and the responsibilities aren't comparable. We're comparing apples, oranges, and bananas here instead of apples to apples. And that's where I hope you would have, come and shed some light on that for us. But as I look at the market study, we really received market information from 9 communities. Beaufort County, City of Beaufort, City of Charleston, City of Folly Beach, City of Goose Creek, City of Hanahan, City of North Charleston, and St. John's, and Town of Mount Pleasant. But those are the communities that we really, now there's a couple odds and ends from others that we've received, but those are the primary cities that we received them. And I'm not sure at those higher level jobs that we're, again, comparing apples to apples. So I'm curious of how you recommend that we reconcile that, because it can, again, that ripples through this entire recommendation sheets that we've received, including, what Scott Pierce mentioned on terms of escalating grades from 1 or sometimes 2 or 3 grades, and all the increases that we've seen in all the pay ranges. So how would you suggest we wrestle with that?
So your current market data is rating all of these peers equally, but we can look at providing additional weight to, rating these peers out differently and providing more weight to specific peers that mean more to you and are more competitive in relation to the city, if you would like us to run those numbers. And we did receive information from the city of Myrtle Beach, but for the data that was presented here, we did exclude those matches just because they were very far outside of your market.
Yeah, Ally, I actually think that would be a good idea. I think for a lot of these positions, and, I think we need to identify and give you very specifics, but we have peer communities, I think, when we get up above a certain level, that probably either should be excluded or weighted differently. And I think that, when we're comparing management jobs to the city of Charleston or city of North Charleston, they're just simply, at least in my opinion, not comparable and should be looked upon differently. But, and, to my comments at the administrators meeting, and I think, Bev, we were talking about it with Jimmy, to focus on the public safety doesn't mean that we're not going to deal with the administrative organization, but our first priority was with the public safety. And even when I get into the public safety database here, and I'm looking, you've presented averages to us, and averages can sort of hide the highs and the lows. I'm seeing recommendations for firefighters for $525 per year of an annual increase, $650, $650, $561. And to me, that just doesn't, to my comment earlier, that just isn't going to cut it. And I think we've got to really go through this and understand where these numbers came from and where we need to be adjusting individuals and the pay scales in order to make sure that we do recruit, retain, and also incorporate the incentive program. So that's going to be a further conversation. But when I see these $500 increases annually for public safety people, and then I see $30,000 recommended increases at other positions, that just doesn't sit right with me, and I think we've got a bit of a flaw in the entire wage study that we need to address.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that the reality of what we're seeing and the turnover that we're seeing speaks to that also. We've got, it looks like, and I believe that you said we have, overall, we have pretty good retention. But when it comes to our firefighters, that's couldn't be farther from the truth. So I'm looking at this as kind of a triage situation. I mean, we got to look at where we really have a problem, and it looks to me that we have a problem in fire and to a lesser extent police. And I feel like we got to focus on that first. And yeah, I don't really think we can, no offense to the city of Isle of Palms, but I don't think that the city of Isle of Palms deals with quite the same level of intricacies and issues that North Charleston and Charleston deal with. I mean, they've got a port and an airport, just to name a few.
Just Rusty.
Yeah, thank you. I want to back up a little bit here because, I know there's been some research done here. I appreciate the study that's been done, Ally. And I know the committee's had to look at this for a while and got some recent information to digest, but most of us on council that aren't on that committee, the administration committee, this is our first time really diving into it and asking some questions and just trying to wrap our minds around this entire thing. And for me, I think number one, it's who do we want to be on Isle of Palms? We have an issue. We have an issue across all departments, and especially public safety, and maybe especially fire within the public safety. But we still have an issue that we need to address for all of our city employees. And if I look, at this first pass at a recommendation here, with making an adjustment, if we went with that, Ally, where would that put us in our rank by pay range average with these other communities? I mean, currently, right now, we're ranked 15th, I think, in pay range average out of the 19 or 20. If we just made this simple adjustment here that's recommended tonight,
Are you talking, which one?
yeah, the total basis salary estimate,
Because I thought it was a different.
where would that put us?
So that would put you roughly in the middle for your general and administrative employees, and then slightly more competitive for your public safety.
The key thing, yeah, the key thing is slightly more competitive. We still would be way down in rank throughout the low country, correct?
Yes, it would be roughly 10 out of the 20 peers and then roughly about 12 out of 20 for your public safety.
Yeah, I just, for me, several years ago, we made some adjustments in salary that we felt good about, and for a year or two, I mean, we were kind of ahead of the game. Ally, you were part of that, I think, probably. And we considered ourselves competitive, and then we sort of backed off and we didn't do much, if any, and then we lost ground in the community. Now we're right back in the same place where we're trying to play some catch-up just to be competitive again. And I don't, I think, I'm with Jimmy Ward on this. I think we've got to see numbers and recommendations and cost of all these different percentiles, and maybe even up to the $25 per hour that Nestler had mentioned earlier, that we look at and say, how much would that cost the city? Points have been made about us paying a lot of money, millions of dollars for sand. That's important. We got to keep the beaches up to date and pristine and healthy. But if we lose any real ground with our employees, all of them, whether it be general administration, government across the hallway, public safety, we put ourselves in a competitive disadvantage in that we can't retain people as well as we should. We have the cost of turnover, which I'm assuming is kind of a hidden cost in here, and then the cost of when you do hire somebody to backfill, you got to train them, so that costs money. All of that's dollars that really aren't accounted for in here. But I think at the very top of it, the overarching thing for me is that as a council, we need to just put our thinking caps on and figure out how we're going to do our employees right by making, say, some very, very significant adjustments. Right now, I could care less about what the city administrator makes versus the city of Charleston or Hanahan or whatever. That's later. I think right now we need to decide what we're going to be from a philosophical standpoint and make some tough choices and say our public safety departments and our administration and our government employees across the hallway, if we don't have them and keep them on board and have them happy, satisfied, and well-trained employees doing the job every day, we're going to continue to lose ground. And that's really all I've got to say on that. The other thing I would mention too is I think going forward, whatever we do, and some of your recommendations here also say that we should do mini surveys on an annual basis. I totally agree with that. We never need to let ourselves get behind the 8 ball again, so to speak. No pun intended. And for me, that's the job that the administration committee has to address every month when they meet. They ought to be asking the tough question of the HR manager or director, where are we on salary issues. Last thing I'm going to say is I know there's a whole lot of incentives that have been put out on the table there. I'm in favor of the incentives package for police and fire, and I think that ought to be baked into anything we do. And I know we're going to have a lot more discussion about it, but that's it. Thank you.
Bev?
Thanks. I just want to reiterate that we did not mean to disenfranchise anyone in that administrative committee, as Scott said, when we said that we would like to look at public safety first. You know, as I dive into the budget, and I hear y'all, and it is important, and I do want to peel back that onion, and if, honestly, Ally, if I understood all the underlying data that you had sent, I would try to peel back the onion, but I too am having trouble doing that because of the market survey, basically. And I have a hard time thinking that we are on the same, looking at the same level, or put on the same level as all those other cities. That there has to be a weighted factor for the big city versus the little city, those with hospitals, those with airports, those with whatever they're dealing with, data centers, whatever you're dealing with. But when I dive into this budget, and sometimes I've heard even up on this council, we have a lot of cash. We've got 54 million in the bank. 92% of that, as I look at it, and where's Deborah? She can correct me on this. I appreciate her sitting with me. Thank you. But as I look at it, and I look at the last financial statements, that were 92% of that is accounted for. It is restricted, it is assigned, we can't touch a lot, and I'm talking about all the funds. So, and the general fund has some restrictions too. So, you know, we're going to have a really intense conversation tomorrow at this budget as we look at what we have and what we can cut back in order to make this a priority. I mean, it's going to be a tough decision.
David?
One more. Can you go to slide 16 on your slides?
16's probably our page. You're looking at the package page number?
The firefighter salary scale proposed.
Right there, yeah.
So, yeah, it was this one. I was kind of pointing out, going through this for me, and Ally, I want to kind of get your opinion, is I kind of see it's not our bands, our pay bands being out of alignment, but it's how people progress through them is more what's an issue, I think, for our fire department. And Chief, please, jump in if I'm saying something. But when I look at this and we do a step progression if everybody's familiar with it, each year a person moves up a step, sometimes two if they get, but at a 1.4%, starting off firefighter, there is no future in this scale. And it's not that moving the scale is not the issue. It's, I just look at how other fire departments, what I've seen in my research on how they do their pay progression. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. Is this a very good scale model to continue to use?
Well, I think, if employees have the opportunity to move at least 2 steps, I think that's a great progression through this plan. I mean, that's a 2.8% adjustment from year to year. But we would recommend that if you were making cost of living adjustments to your plan and looking at those on a yearly basis, you would also be updating your pay plan in addition to those step adjustments. So the employees may have the benefit of both a cost of living adjustment and a step progression, which I think you're not currently doing a cost of living adjustment every year.
Right. Scott? Yeah.
So, I think we had some specific recommendations coming out of or at least considerations and some next steps to come out of the administrative committee. And I think we've hit some of the questions and issues that were challenging in the study right now. But I think we're all kind of on the same page that the police and fire, some of these recommendations are very close and workable. And the only pieces I think that we have outstanding are the quantification for the fire department's incentive programs that we were going to consider in the next administrative committee meeting, and I think maybe you're going to be doing it in the public safety meeting as well. So the thinking there, and I agree, if we said something that disenfranchised the administrative organization, that was not the intent. It was, I think, with what was in the study currently at the, firefighter and the individual employee levels, both in police and fire, there's some very workable information here that we can probably proceed in. We've got to have the two incentive programs, I think, quantified out. And I think the question that we're asking in the administrative committee is, for these last 2 years, why haven't we had incentive programs if our competitors have been basically attracting everybody away from us? We've not known about that at the administrative committee. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of information that seems to be going on within the departments that may not be making its way to council. I am all for these incentive programs. I think that from what we've heard from the two chiefs, these are extremely helpful in not only recruiting, but retaining and bolstering the pay scales for the people that are achieving certifications, education, et cetera. So those we need to incorporate, and we also need to feather it into what does that mean for the increases. And when it comes to, I think, the administrative positions, and I'm talking more of the management, I think a lot of the individual positions are comparable across the board to all of to some of these peer communities. But if you look at the details, and I don't know how many of you actually gone in and taken a look at this model, I know David and some others have, but there are some real, I think, wild swings that are very, very costly that I think because of the small sample sizes, they're 5 or less, and we're comparing against very large cities. I think we've got to treat those and do that step of, let's compare job description to job description before we commit to making these changes. So those would be the kind of two tracks when I talk about the two tracks. And what I'd like to do is try to target, by the April council meeting, we're coming forth with the recommendations on the public safety, if that's doable. And then not shortly thereafter, I think we're looking at the new fiscal year. Concurrently, we can come back to Ally and ask you specifically to take a look at some of the changes or some of the modifications we'd like to make in the assessment on some of these upper administrative positions.
Ally, do you have a comment?
Sorry.
No, we're happy to run any analysis that you would like for us to run. If you want us to pull the data from different percentiles of the market, if you would like us to weight those peers differently, we're happy to make any of those adjustments for you.
Jimmy, then Katie.
Yeah, real quick. I think the average rank and file employee throughout all departments in the city don't do an in-depth analysis about whether a community's got an airport or a hospital before they go to the grocery store. And they don't ask all these questions that it's our job to inquire about. But I really would like the city would take a really hard look at being a leader in this and just moving up like a few percentile is not going to cut it. We need to make sure whatever we do, we're not looking at this again 2 years down the road. And so why don't we consider leading and not following?
Katie and then John. Sorry, John.
So I don't want to put Chief Oliveris on the spot, but I also would like to give him the opportunity to respond to specifically the public comments today and that chart in particular. And I don't know if it's better today or if you before the next meeting would like to address that. But I feel like that's something I would like to hear more of your perspective of what do you think the answer is? Is it $25 an hour? Is it, from what discussions I know we've had in the past, I think it's more complicated than that, and there's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. But I kind of feel like, when we get something like this at the beginning of our meeting, I feel like for us to listen to public comments and just kind of move on and not look at this pink elephant in the corner. I mean, I personally would like to know more about how we have that trend.
John, sorry.
I just, maybe Scott said, but I'd like to what is the timeline and where do we go from here? Because when we originally set out on this, we said we wanted to engage Evergreen to update the files for us to be prepared through the budget cycle to put numbers into the budget that would take effect with the next fiscal year budget. And here it is, March, and we still have time, I think, to do all of it. But there's work to be done, I think, what we're hearing. And I still would like to see us work very aggressively on the public safety, but still try to achieve, to get a recommendation for all the city positions by the for us to put in the budget. And that may work in a parallel path, and it may be the last thing we put into the budget, but I still would like to see us try to work towards that, personally. The other thing is we've tossed around a lot, but I don't know if the committee's going to get anywhere based on what, if we don't really have clear-lined expectations on where the ending point is. I mean, just to give a perspective, and this is just the math, but $25 an hour puts the proposed minimum on a F1 at $74,000. So as you ripple through there, you can do the math on how that ripples through all the positions. But it takes the lowest one from 53 to 74. And so that's quite a, that's quite a jump. And how that ripples through the budget, I mean, I'd love to do it. I just don't know what that does to the finances of the city. So I think that's what we're going to have to work hand in hand, I think, through this thing. But I don't know if the committee's going to be successful with, until we can collectively come together and say, where do we want to be? That represents, I heard Ally say, 77% of the communities that were surveyed.
That minimum, yeah.
Right, Ally?
At the minimum,
Yeah, at the minimum was 77 percentile.
We've got a Ways and Means Committee coming up in a couple of weeks.
But I think until we reconcile where we want to end up, and this goes for now, and I think we wrestled with this 2.5 years ago when we did this last time, and we said we wanted to be in the upper tier for public safety and at the median for everybody else. Maybe that's changed, and if it is, then I think we're going to have to wrestle with that with council and give some direction to the committee. Otherwise, I don't know how they'll ever be successful with developing a proposal for us.
So I think a couple of things real quick, John, to your timeline and question. So what's in the budget right now is the recommendation at $638,000, fully loaded about $880,000. So that's baked into the budget right now, just as a placeholder, just to show you the financial effect of what that looks like. So to your point, I think it is a parallel path, and we've got time to dig into it a little bit, and I hope the committee will do that. But this is a real nit question, and I'll get back to something else. Ally and Chief O, this may be for you guys and Chief Cornett. So we have 25 steps in the public safety program, and we've heard some feedback that that's not enough. Do we need to go higher? Do others do that? Ally, any comment on that, or Chiefs?
So average is about 30 steps, but we are starting to see that number come down because we do not see the average employee staying 30 years within a career if your steps are based on, a year of service. Yours are structured a little bit differently because employees can move up to 2 steps, but we're happy to tweak the step number for you. That's an easy adjustment within the file, and we can run different budget numbers if you want to decrease those number of steps, but that does increase your costs because now employees have less steps to move through that range.
Right. Chiefs, any comment on the 25-step? And I know there's a real nit in this whole thing, but it's important.
Well, they're coming up here. Can I ask a question? To your point, though, Ally, we're moving up 2 steps because we don't adjust the ranges, though, on an annual basis. In other words, we'll give a COLA increase, but we don't adjust the range. And so that's 1 step in itself. And then we give another on merit. But, I mean, if we were adjusting COLA every year, the ranges based on whatever COLA we give, then that would move, the ranges would continually move up and take away this 2-step progression potentially.
Yeah, I think you would have to readjust your compensation philosophy and outlining how employees would make through the range if you were doing a consistent cost of living adjustment every year.
Yeah.
Just speaking on the 25 steps, 25 years of service is what I'm classified for retirement. majority of my officers that have started have to reach 28 before they're eligible to retire. So 25 is still low compared to where our newer firefighters and police officers are coming in, because we're both in the same retirement system, same number of years. And when we do add in the fact that you can potentially get 2 steps, you are typically if you got in and you were a great employee, that means by year 13, 14, you're maxed out. And while we have a plan to compensate for that, it's not the same as getting that step like every year. So it may be something that may be worth adjusting the number of years in there, because 25 is great if you started when I started and you're retiring at 25, because you're probably already almost there.
Yeah.
I know I have an employee now that if we put the incentives in for education, we'll only get one additional step for that education will be maxed out. And that individual who's close to retiring, that I'm trying to convince to not retire, would then lose that benefit for me to have that argument with that individual, because they've told me this, that they just don't see the benefit to stay after that if they're not going to continue to get those steps.
And Chief O, before you step up, Chief Cornett, so I know we put the STEP program in 4 years ago maybe. I mean, is that still competitive from you guys' standpoint and viewpoint and what you're looking at when we're losing folks?
Competitive in, sorry, what was that?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if he was asking me or you.
No, I'm asking Chief.
Okay.
It's competitive more so with hiring, what I've seen, because when I'm bringing employees in and I'm showing them, because that's part of the conditional offer packet I show them, is this is our step plan. And what it does is it tells them in so many years, I know that as long as I'm a good employee, I could be here. And if I just have a range, then they're automatically go, I can max out in half the time, right? And that's not reality. So showing them the steps has been beneficial in recruiting. I don't know how much it's done with retention necessarily. I think the bigger discussion is what we're doing now with the pay study, making those wages right so that they want to retain. Things like the incentives that are so critical for saying, hey, we value the time you've put in to prepare yourself and be the best employee that we have. I think those play a bigger role in our retention than necessarily having the step plan.
Yeah, Chief, can you comment on, when you were in our meeting, you did comment on what kind of an impact you thought introducing the incentive program, which we don't have today, might have on not only retention but recruiting. And then also, I think there was one other thing I think would be good to share with the group here. We talked about currently we're not acknowledging the number of years of experience necessarily when we're placing somebody in on the recruitment side of things. Some of them are coming in on 0. And I think that's a real bigger issue, I think, from what I heard on the fire department. That those are 2 big levers that could not only impact inbound compensation placement, but the retention and all. Can you comment on, I think you said you only had one individual that might be impacted by that, but the incentive program. Yeah.
Correct. For us, I recently had a candidate who came in with a degree. We got the conditional offer. They really wanted to be here, but our numbers just didn't meet based off of the incentives that individual could get at another agency for their education. And so ultimately they did decline the conditional offer. So we know that matters, but also for us in police and fire, we have specialized skills that we need personnel to have. And it is very beneficial if we can hire somebody who's already skilled and trained in our career field and has those incentives. For example, we have to qualify with firearms every year. To do that, I have to have firearms instructors. That's the only way the academy will accept me qualifying them. And that takes driving instructors. It takes marine operators out here for both police and fire, because we are an island surrounded by water. And then a lot of different tasks like that give us the ability when somebody applies, that could be the difference where they say, hey, I'm a firearms instructor, or hey, I'm a certified marine operator. They can look at that and go, well, hey, there's an incentive for that. So you're actually going to get a little bit more. I think it'll play a tremendous role in recruitment and retention for education and for the bonus and advanced certifications.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we had our first conversation about this at the last committee meeting. You put it together as far as what the levers are and what the cost would be. I mean, I don't see why this isn't something we could consider very, very quickly, get it implemented and put that tool in your retention.
Do we have that?
It's in your packet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're going to talk a little bit
your
about it. but-
proposal for the incentive.
Those are things that, and I guess we ought to do some postmortem after this is all over and say, hey, why have we been going so long without this? Why is it that our compensation or, HR, we're not looking at these things and bringing them to council for aggressive implementation? Chief O?
Well, thank y'all, first and foremost, because we're not the only community that is challenged with this. It is everybody. And I was texting earlier, one of the local fire chiefs, he's like, hey, I don't know if it helps or not. He said, but we're looking, and they're the leader in the study. He said, we're looking at updating our compensation plan. They're working through it for FY27. And so they're doing what we're doing. And so the numbers that we have, I think it's important for us to remember across the citywide, and Ally can speak to this, other municipalities are doing this. So as soon as we elevate what we think is going to be market, is actually not, because those that are ahead will leapfrog ahead. So that's a challenge for a municipality of our size. And so that's important to remember, that concept. But as far as the STEP program, Chief Cornett, kind of hit on it. It's 28 years for retirement for us. And if we move 2 steps every year, then we cut that scale in half. And right now we're at 25. So last year I had 1 employee. This year I have 1 employee who did not get the 1.4% because they were over the 25-year scale. And we performed an eval on them. They did a phenomenal job. Been here, a while, but they're still getting after it and getting it done. And no performance deficiencies, but because of our scale, not their performance, they aged out and weren't eligible. So that's important to note. And so I don't know, and Janice and I have spoken about it, different opportunities, what else could we do? And Ally would, obviously be able to speak to that. But a step scale does work, to Chief Cornett's point, because the employee looks at it and says, hey, that human resource, that valuable piece of talent that is so crucial to our success, says, okay, if I come in at year 1 and I promote, I can get this. If I come in at year 1 and I stay at this grade for 10 years, this is what I will make. And it's really helpful for planning, for budgeting. But our steps are too, in my opinion, with looking at the market, the 1.4% per step is a little too small. I think that percentage, I think the step scale could work a little more effectively if the years were spanned out and then the steps were more impactful. So you move less steps on the scale, but the percentages were increased. So maybe each step should be 2.8 instead of 1.4. That's something to consider. And then you're not moving through the scale as fast, but you're still getting the same percentage. But again, where we fall behind, to Councilman Pierce's point, and other people have mentioned it, are our incentives. But it's overall compensation. And like mentioned, and Mr. Warden and Councilman Warden, everybody else who go to the grocery store, you have to, the retirement benefits are great. We're very thankful for those. Our city has a great insurance. We're very thankful for those. Isle of Palms is a beautiful place. It's gorgeous. We have all these things in our wheelhouse that are already here in place, but where we do struggle is over time, we fall behind our competitors.
And Chief, so your comment about the step at 1.4 is, and this goes into compensation philosophy. I mean, if there's a accompanying cost of living adjustment, does that ease your burden a little bit? I know you can't count on that every year, but
it's helpful. So if we know that, so for example, somebody mentioned, we don't want to be here again. I think Councilman Ward said, in 2 years. The amount of staff time that this takes, the time for y'all to deliberate this. So 2 things I'm hopeful for. So to kind of answer your point, Mayor Pounds. Number 1, we get our compensation up to a level that philosophically, like Councilman Streetman noted, that it works for us, that council's comfortable with it because our community is comfortable with it. And if those 2 things mesh, then our employees more than likely are going to be comfortable with that because all 3 of those pieces are aligned. So that's number 1. If we can do that, that's crucial. The second piece is how do we not get here again And to your point, the cost of living, having that factored in, and I don't know, and Ally could speak to this, but in our inflationary environment, the low country environment, being one of the 15th most expensive places to live in the United States and the 19th in the world, if you look at different metrics, and our people are traveling 45 minutes to get here to work and even farther now because of housing. So if we can get our wages up to where they need to be, and then we can put that system in place where it isolates, politically from having to make these decisions, I think we'd be very successful. Northern Virginia did that. They used the 90th percentile, and anytime three, let's say in one department, anytime three of those positions, let's say our base level, our mid-level manager, and let's just say my position, anytime those three were out of market by 10%, then they were required to go back to market and make an adjustment. Therefore, they were always around 85 to 95% of the market, and it was just kind of baked in. The political body didn't have to wrestle with it, and the emotion that's tied to it, as you can see tonight, it's tough. It is really tough, and I don't want to get into details, but I mean, I do have firefighters out there, and I'm sure Chief Cornett does too. It has police officers, and I know people in our city as well, but they're definitely struggling, and it's a real thing. And I'm just so thankful that council is deliberating it. And when I first came over here 4 years ago, one of the biggest selling points was that we were doing a wage and compensation study every 2 years. Because as fire chief, I was like, I do not want to take that position because that is one of the #1 challenges in municipal government. And and I was like, okay, if we do a wage and compensation study every 5 years, where I came from, it just was not working. It was too long. We couldn't catch up. So doing it every 2 years, I'm like, all right, great. We got a fighting chance. And Isle of Palms is a beautiful community. I mean, who would not want to come to work here? It sells itself. So we have that in spades. So knowing that was one of the big driving forces for me to be able to take this position. The other thing I would like to point out is people ask me about Isle of Palms and this, how is it? How are you doing over there? I'm like, all our challenges are the same. The only difference from my position, I have less people to delegate it to. And when I first got here, Donnie Pitts said, he's like, Craig, he's like, you got to wear a lot of hats. And that's right. I mean, I'm throwing up flags on Palm Boulevard, toilets, but, doing other personnel stuff, high-level things. But we may not have an airport. We may not have a port, but we have the Atlantic Ocean. And as you know, with beach renourishment, that's tough. And to get a firefighter who can fight fire, want to go do chest compressions on a pediatric patient, and who wants to get out there in the ocean and swim in all kinds of conditions, it takes a special person. So for us, we may not have an airport, we may not have a port, but we have the Atlantic Ocean. And to me, from a community risk assessment perspective, that is more challenging than some of those other fixed facilities. So I would like to just say that on behalf of all our department heads and everybody that I see doing everything fruit basket turnover. Yes, it may not look complex when you look at a job description at City of Charleston or North Charleston, but man, I tell you, I see Chief Cornett doing stuff that even somebody would, everybody doing things that somebody else would be handling that. So it's the same work. It's just you're focusing your efforts in different areas. But I'm just extremely thankful, and I can tell you personally and professionally, this has absolutely worn me out, and I don't want to get here again either. I'm with y'all. I know y'all don't want to get here again either. And to Ms. Myers, Councilman Myers, to your point, this is just a quick little data point. So we have 4 firefighters, 3 we hired in around, I believe, August, September timeframe. And the other one, I think, was in a little bit earlier, in July. They all went to recruit school. 3 are graduating March 27th. 1 is graduating May 4th. Why that's important is we're paying for those firefighters their salary and benefits for about 8 months, and then we're backfilling their position with overtime and other costs while they're in school. And the other piece to that is as soon as they come out, they're green as the grass. That we've got to teach them everything. We got to teach them our way. We got to get them on the jet ski. We got to get them on the boat. We got to get them, hey, this is how we operate. So let's say that's, if it's 47%, Ms. Ladd and I were talking earlier today, say that's our benefit cost, and we start out a firefighter at 50,000. We add another 47% on that. I think when Deborah can vouch for this, it's probably, we're closer to $100,000. That's without equipment. So we're paying for those 4 firefighters. They're 8 months, not 12, but close to $100,000. And so that retention piece is so key, like Councilman Pierce mentioned with the incentives. The incentives are another great piece to throw at it. And so just from my perspective, and looking at the research and the data, and my perspective as fire chief, I kind of see like 2 great options for us. We can, move up percentiles like Councilman Ward mentioned. Like Councilman Pierce, we can kind of gap it with some incentives. And I think that's where the bob and weave comes in from City Council that will really be impactful for our people, but also budgetarily be sustainable. So the incentive program, it works. Our competitors have it. And getting the percentile up from everybody makes it super easy for everybody. If we're up in the 90th percentile, our incentives, will go down commensurate with that. We still need to have them to support our special programs, but maybe the amount or dollar amount goes down because we're funded at a 80 or 90th percentile. And Allie could tell us what those numbers look like. But again, I'm sorry I'm taking too much time, but this is one of the most important things I believe so far in my 10 years fire chief, since y'all graciously elected to support me in this role, is for our city. And none of our firefighters live here, not a single one. I mean, I live over in Mount Pleasant. It takes me, when we had a fire in Wild Dunes, I pulled it up on my GPS in the back there at Mariners Walk, and it was like 22 minutes. And I'm like, what? How is that 22 minutes away? So none of us live here, but we love this community. And we love the people that speak on our behalf. We love working for council. Y'all attend our events, and this is an amazing place. And we need some help right now, like all our city employees do, our beach. There's a lot of priorities, but it's an investment. And if we can, focus on that investment piece, there's a lot of great opportunity in percentile, step scale, how do we move through that? And then, what do we do for the future so we don't get here again? Because I want us, our council, I want to be working on higher level things like Chief Cornett. He was going to go to the FBI Academy this week in Quantico. He didn't go because his people are most important. He wants to be here. I was supposed to be at a conference in Orlando this week and be part of some, pretty amazing things down there. I got my registration in October. I didn't go because our people are the most important thing, and that's okay. But this is how much it means to us, and it's super, super challenging, I know, but just know that our people, public safety, everybody is, and y'all know this, I mean, they're working hard, and they'll do everything they can for this city. And again, I just can't thank you enough for the time. And I apologize for being so verbose, but I just get hyped up about it and excited. And that we have to be our advocate for our personnel. And then everybody in the city too, recreation, public services. And we have an amazing city. And let's just philosophically look at it in an amazing way.
Can I just ask one
Yes, ma'am.
question about
Sorry.
what you just said? And I think you made a really good point when you're talking about when you came here and the wage study that we do every 2 years. And I felt like when we did the wage study last time that we came out of it in a good place and that everybody was happy. But it seems like it hasn't, 2 years later, it hasn't worked. So what can we do this time to make sure that we don't think that we're doing everything and we're not, I mean, 2 years ago, we didn't do enough. Or we didn't do the right, whatever we did, at least in the fire department, it seems to not have worked. And so that's where I'm trying to get my head around, because that was the first time I had ever participated in a wage study. I came out of it thinking that everybody felt good about it and we had done a good job. So I want to make sure that we don't do that again.
Yes. And I think the key to that is, and I think Councilman Streetman mentioned it, or somebody mentioned it, and Janice could speak to this, Ally could as well, Deborah could. As we make these adjustments, what do we put in place to maintain that market competitive edge? And once we get it up there, what is it, in 1.4 steps, 1.4%, probably not going to work per step. We're probably looking at, market. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but, if it's 7% a year, if it's 6% a year, to maintain what we have, then maybe that will buffer us. Maybe our incentive program, a robust incentive program, for all city departments, but I'll speak for my department specifically, like the education piece, the special certification piece. That's super helpful. So I think that would be my answer. Once we get it up there, Ally could probably provide us recommendations on how we maintain that market competitive stance. I think this year we had and Deborah, you could, correct, but I don't remember the percentage that we have potentially for January of next year with cost of living and that. But maybe that's something, that's what I recommend. Keeping it at a higher level so we don't get here again. Maintaining all our hard work that y'all put in.
Yeah.
Katie, I would,
And there's been a significant market change in the last 2 years since we did. I mean, there's been an arms race on a public safety wage studies, Chief, to your point. I mean, the top level city that's on this list is looking to do their own. I mean, we did end up in a good spot a couple of years ago, but this market shifted very quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can I ask
that's
you-
out of our control with, the inflation and housing, so.
Go ahead.
go ahead, Scott.
No, I just had one quick question, and it was to a comment that Gary Nessler had made during his public comments, and he said something about early departures, where some people were coming in and they stayed for maybe I misunderstood, but only stayed on the department for days or a couple of weeks or a month or two and then departed. Are we getting that kind of did we have that kind of a churn this year, where we had employees that came in and just stayed for a very, 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 very short period of time? And if that is true, what happened? They just got a better offer or what? And how big an issue was that? Was it 2 people, 5 people, 10 people?
I'd have to look at the numbers and see, but to go back and research it and look at how many days or how many months or years they were here. So I can't answer
But did you,
that,
I mean, you
but,
must know that did some of your people just come in and swivel right back out on your
yes, and then
recruiting?
like Ally's numbers kind of reference that too, just from, citywide perspective. But yes, we have some that, less than 6 months. We had a gentleman went back to Goose Creek. And then we had 3 that went to Colleton County that were here, I believe, under a year. And that's probably part of that. There's 4 right there that I can point to that were within the last, 6 to 8 months.
Janice, can we get that for the next committee meeting? I'd like to see all the turnover in all the departments, how long they stayed. And, if we've got this kind of a spike here, it would be interesting to know what positions they were in, when they came, how quickly they departed. And, I guess lastly, it sounds to me, and I don't want to oversimplify, but it sounds like what we did 2 years ago. We got ourselves in a good place, but we stayed static. We didn't move. And we didn't up our pay scales by CPI or anything, which lost you an employee on the back end of it. And we didn't do any incentives. And let's learn from that and not do that again.
Douglas?
That was going to be my point, is that I do think, kind of debriefing the last go-round, that we did make an adjustment, and then we did not do a COLA adjustment right on the heels of that. So it's almost like we got
Got to a spot.
got up to a spot and then immediately kind of fell behind a bit. So we've intentionally, and we've talked a little bit about this at admin, and it's expensive, but planning to do an adjustment, then a cost of living, and then another adjustment to just kind of get back on pace and stay on pace.
Yeah. Chief, thank you all. I think just to keep us moving, we'll have a whole lot more conversation around this topic tomorrow, and I would just ask the admin committee to move fast, because we do need this to be parallel conversation.
just in closing, and while we have Ally, and I just want to be sure that I feel like we have a few takeaways specifically, but I just want to be sure that we're all in agreement with what the next steps are from Evergreen's perspective. I think we've heard, and we're going to talk later about the incentives parcel. That's really with the city staff. We're handling that, and we can advise on that. Ally can certainly look at that and advise us on that. 70th percentile, providing that information. We want some amount higher than that as
Yes.
well.
Mhm. I do.
Yeah.
Well, as much information as we can get, the better.
But I guess I want to be sure we provide the reports that you all are expecting. Scott, did
The
you?
70th percentile was in here. I mean, it's very quantifiable.
You can add 80 or 90 if you want.
It's not going to change. It's just going to become, the ranges are going to be, very, very much higher, and it's going to, I mean, if people want to see it, then provide it. I mean, I don't think there's any harm in that at all. It's not going to change the sample size or who to compare. It's just going to increase the ranges.
So what else do we need for staff or Ally between now and the next time you will discuss this?
I mean, it really would have been helpful if we could have seen kind of we've got these ranges. Looking at these presentations in average doesn't do me a lot of good, because when I go into the individual database here and see who's getting what for what position, it seems, and I'll just say my opinion, it seems like we really defeated the purpose of putting the money where it was needed, and that was in kind of rank and file people who were having the highest turnover. So in my opinion, I want to match the dollar in the investment to make sure that we're paying people fairly and equitably, but also solving for the issue of the money retention along with the incentive programs. So, I know, Ally, for some reason, we're not able to get, I guess, the data behind each of these municipalities to see how much weighting. And I'll give you one example. We've got situations in the database where people lower on the organization chart, or the recommendation is to have them have a higher pay range than the person above them. That doesn't make sense to me. So something is really flawed. Every one of these positions has a very unique universe that they're being compared against. And so when I look at it and it says a subordinate is supposed to get paid more than the one up above them in the hierarchy, something's off. So when I was reciting those pay increases for the firefighters, I can't support that. I think we got to do a lot more. And that's where the averages really skew the up and downs.
So is that a task for Ally?
I think we got to go through it at the next meeting, and so everybody understands what we're actually looking at.
Well, we're the ones responsible.
Yeah.
Right up here
Agreed.
at this table.
Well, and again, I would just
Have that
encourage,
information.
I would just encourage the admin committee to meet as much as you need to get us to hit our budget timeline. I mean, we are notorious for data, and overanalyzing everything. We need to get this in and hit our 7/1 date and make it
Yeah,
happen.
this isn't overanalyzing, this is looking at the details
I
to
didn't
make
say it
sure we're
was,
doing
Scott.
it.
I just said we
But we
can't.
just got this information Friday, so let's just be clear on that. We
But
just
they
got
had,
the
but the
information
committee's
Friday.
had it a little bit
No, the
longer.
committee had it Friday, we got it the same time you did.
Friday.
No, didn't move fast.
If I can,
Douglas, do we need more data or more request of Ally?
That's my
That's your
question. for you
question.
all. Yeah. It sounds like time. Sounds
No,
like
we,
there's not.
Sounds like we're-
I think, like I said, public safety, I think we're going to be in decent shape to make some moves fairly quickly. I think we can come up with some recommendations fairly quickly. I think when we get into some of these other positions, we are going to have to do some, those 15 positions I talked about that are taking jumps, they're basically organization changes. We're going to have to take a look at those position by position. And that'll be a little differently. But we can go through that at the next meeting.
Dave?
So you get kind of moving forward, next step, being new, I didn't know historically, but it kind of surprised me if we're not just, doing a CPI based adjustment to all our pay scales each year.
We're following that.
We should be.
Don't disagree.
And I don't know what's the next step to implement that as part of the budget cycle, but again, without having anything better, basing it on your CPI index for last year, it should be across the board, at least 2.7 increase to all our pay scales. And then to get into this budget cycle and then look moving forward, I think we got to look at each of those individual recommendations. I'd like to know from the department heads is, what do they think of these changes in their employee salaries that are recommended, and get their input. Not that I don't, I think they're the ones with the most insight to what their employees, functions are, and are they comparable to what is being recommended. But again, I was kind of asking next step, I guess, or my first one would be, let's go ahead and approve a cost of living.
It's in the budget.
And just, adjust all the pay scales based on whatever percentage, and I guess that's the argument, what percentage?
Yeah. So tomorrow you'll look at the budget that'll have an evergreen placeholder.
I won't be here, but.
I know, but you'll have a merit
Yeah.
and a COLA for 1/1.
Well, the COLA to me should apply to the scales. The merits are people shifting within the
I agree.
scales, right?
I'm with you. I get it.
I think what you're calling about is a policy to do that on an ongoing basis. And that should be a part of the recommendation coming forward on the whole compensation, that our ranges change annually based on whatever the COLA is, and the COLA should be tied to some index, not us arbitrarily picking what we think the cost of living is. And so that ought to be a policy change that made with part of the compensation plan.
And if we haven't been doing that, we've been handicapping our team.
Bev, I'm sorry, you had a question.
Well, I guess I was just, I don't know if we can do this, but if we've got the public safety working on this and both admin, we've got to do a deep dive into these numbers. So can we work on it together?
The public safety?
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to do it, to help if you need
I mean,
help.
do committees do that? I mean,
So there.
or is it
from my
just a Ways and
perspective,
Means thing? I don't
There
know.
has not, I don't know that public safety has this in their,
I mean, it's really an admin
Agenda,
committee item.
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard that on this.
I think that was the first I heard that.
Okay. I might have
That
misunderstood.
public safety was also looking at this.
No, we don't have it on our agenda, but
Okay.
we talked about it at the meeting, remember this last time, and I think you'd recommended that it stay in admin to do all of it. I'm willing to, we could, I think that public safety committee.
Well, maybe it's a Ways and Means thing then.
Yeah, we can address it at our committee, and then we can also
And
address
then-
it at Ways and Means with
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good path.
I would like to bring, dive a little deeper into the public safety meeting, at least to start off with, and then bring it up to Ways and Means.
I think the more hands on this, the better, and I know
Yeah.
I think you're diving into the detail. The people need to take a look at what we're actually getting for the information.
Ally, anything else from your viewpoint?
No, I think that I really appreciate the in-depth conversation, and as part of Evergreen, we are happy to rerun the numbers at any percentile, rate those peers differently, adjust those scales accordingly. Just let us know.
Thanks.
Douglas?
Thank you,
that was
Ally.
Clear as mud.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Douglas, I'll let you take us through the dashboard and SDR report.
Yes, in your packet is the dashboard. Just highlight on there, we do have HR vacancy in City Hall. We were hoping that we had some candidates there we got pretty far down a path. Unfortunately, they have, they're not interested for various reasons, but, so we're a little bit starting at scratch. Starting from scratch on those two. Pay was I think was a thing.
Yep.
We have 2 police officers and 1 communication specialist in the police department. We have 3 paramedic firefighter vacancies in the fire department. I will point out that on the short-term rental dashboard, Bev and Deborah sat down for a little bit about the 119 units, and I think they've come up with a way to display that. It's adding a column, actually adding a series of columns, but On that page, you now see total parcels, and then you see total short-term rental licenses and commercial condos. So the old column that we used to look at was the one that said total short-term rental licenses. That's totaling currently at 1,727. This new column is 3 over, and it is total short-term rental licenses and commercial condos. So that 119 is added in there to that column to give you a total of 1,846. That also generated a new color in your pie chart, and I think it is the dark, yeah, it's kind of dark purple there in your pie chart.
Douglas?
But that still keeps the Wild Dunes Hotel as just one unit, correct?
Yeah,
The hotel.
well, there are two
Sorry,
hotels.
2 units.
Yeah, so there's, yeah,
That
that's
would-
still not a,
Not in these numbers. Yeah.
yeah, those two are not in there, so
So
it's,
that is still being treated like a hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Katie, we had looked at that with the hotels too, but it really skewed everything because true hotels, they don't have separate TMS numbers, very different from the commercial condo. So, Question for you, rentalscape.
Yes.
So, I've been tracking this for a while, but the potential unlicensed rentals identified by rentalscape, we haven't had any in a long time. Are we still using
Yes.
rentalscape? So
Yeah,
are
it
they
is-
still doing their?
Yes,
and
it
just
is
not
so
flagging
active.
anything, or?
yeah, it's like a daily, where it was, that rentalscape program got kind of turned on, got activated, and there was instantly a pile of short-term rentals. It's now a daily thing. If something pops up there, it gets taken care of
Okay.
very quickly.
But we've had zero for a long time. Yeah, okay.
I believe that is because it's instantly taken care of. I'll just
Okay.
verify that is the case. It's been a great tool. I mean,
Yeah.
you literally turns it on, something shows up, we see it that next day, so it's been great.
Thank you, Douglas. Deborah, I know we've got a whole couple hours tomorrow for budget review, but you got financial report through February in our packet.
Yes, sir. So we kind of scaled back on some of the reports and kept the summary for you all, as well as some detailed information for the general fund. And I just want to go over some of the highlights. So this, our forecast is, fluid, so it will continue to change as we continue to get more information in. But I want to go over some of the numbers that are driving our budget versus forecast numbers. Revenue for the general fund, we're forecasting some increases in property taxes, building permits, and insurance fees. For our capital fund, we're forecasting the request and use of the NPDES stormwater funds to pay for waterway. The muni fund, we are, of course, expecting some increases in the accommodation tax fees as well as interest. Hospitality taxes are not, taxes are not performing as well as some of the other tourism funds, but there has been a little bit of increase in interest income. Our state fund, we're forecasting some increases in the accommodation fees and interest. And then the beach fund, we are projecting that we will, of course, incur costs this year. So we are projecting additional fees in the accommodation tax, as well as grant revenue that we receive from previous year and the 1.5 that was awarded this year. The marina fund, we, of course, are deferring the dredging to 2027. As far as expenses, general fund, we will not hire the beach resilience officer this year. That is still in the budget for next year, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. We also have some additional costs with vehicle maintenance, and our electric and gas prices are increasing, and that's due to Dominion Energy continuing to raise their rates. The building fund, I'm sorry, the building department is experiencing some unexpected or some unbudgeted expenses because of contract services where the building inspector position was not filled at beginning of the fiscal year, so we had to contract that service out, and then they have also been helping us with the transition of that position. And for the capital fund, this shows that we, of course, deferred 38th and 41st. However, there was an increase in the cost for waterways, so that kind of washed, kind of netted out that department. Muni fund, it's not quite, is it muni fund? No, I'm sorry. So, yes, it's the muni fund. So the muni fund is not going to, it will be less than that. When I went back through the numbers, it looks like we had the ditch maintenance in there of $199,000. We had it in there twice. We have it under the ditch maintenance and capital expense where it has always showed up in the past, but as you see, the budget is a little bit different. So we will take one of those out because right now it's currently in there twice. Hospitality, of course, will save on the Dominion Energy underground lines. That's not happening this year, projected for next year. And then the beach fund, we have already spent $1.5 million in professional and contract services costs. And then we are projecting to spend another $6 million this year for the beach renourishment project. Marina fund, we will defer the dredging expense to FY27. So that kind of break down all the funds. And I want to go to page 2. This would be page 51. So in the past, you have asked for a reconciliation between the cash balances and the fund balances. And so I gave you a physical sheet that kind of shows how those fund balances are derived compared to the cash balances, and then kind of where we plan to land at the end of the fiscal year. And then I made some notes on the side of what's driving those numbers. Of course, the current cash position does not take into consideration that we have four more months left of revenue and expenses. So that kind of plays a big part of it. But that detail is on the sheet that I actually handed out. So once you have a chance to review it, because I know you just got it today, once you have a chance to review it, let's talk about any questions you may have regarding that. The page 52, this was the cash needs page that you had seen before. So what we did was we tried to kind of list out all the capital expenses that were budgeted for this year, kind of show where we are year to date, and then kind of show where we are projecting to land with those expenses. And then at the top of the page, these are kind of where the fund balances are projecting to land for the next 4 years. So the net income is driven off of the budget that you currently have, the budget projections that you currently have. You see 27, there's a net income loss of $13 million. Of course, that's mostly due to the beach. So at the end of 27, we should be around, the fund balance will be around $39 million. Again, all of this is very fluid. So this will change as we continue to work through the budget, as we continue to add costs or savings to the budget. But I put it to the top so you can kind of see, like as things change, you can see where the fund balances will land. For page 54, our tourism revenue projections, what we did here was we recorded actual cost, and then we recorded some forecasts based on where we currently are. So for the muni accommodations fee, you can see the graph change. You can see that the actual numbers are in black, and then the forecasted numbers are in that kind of bluish turquoise color. And then on the graph, you can see that the dotted lines are our forecast numbers versus the actual numbers. We will, of course, increase this as, update this as the money come in. But the last amount that we received, that the city received, was $137,000 for the muni fund. Now, I don't know if you paid attention to the cash balances, but the county did send us a check, an astronomical check for $1.5 million this month for the accommodation tax. However, they were only supposed to send us $274,000. So that's why that cash balance is so big, because they,
give it back?
they send us the wrong amount. So if you paid attention to that, you'll see that cash balance is big, but that is going back out to them. For page 55, our state, we have not received anything this month. You know, that comes in quarterly. That's a quarterly fund that the state gives us. But we're projecting to land at $2.5 million this year. On page 56, for our county pass-through, that's also a quarter receipt. So we haven't received anything since the $128,000. We're planning to, forecasting that we will have $918,000 in revenue in that account this year. On page 57, for our hospitality tax, as you can see, our hospitality taxes have not, they just, and I don't think it's timing, I just don't think that the businesses are performing as well as they have done in the past, or maybe not reporting as much as they reported in the past. So that account for the last 2 years have kind of decreased. So we are projecting 1.4 for that fund this year. For page 58, our beach preservation fund, again, that 137 is the actual amount that is due to the city. We're projecting 2.2 to come in for that fund to land at 2.2 this year. 59, page 59 is our local option sales tax. This last payment was $89,000, $89,541. We are projecting that account to be 5% higher over last year, landing at $1.2 million. There was a question on the waterway project worksheet last month. This is 60 through 62. I think there was an entry on there for 1.5 or 1.7 or 2 something. Anyway, there was an entry on there. So sometimes, and please forgive me, I will pay more attention. Sometimes I do math on the sheet, just trying to get a number. But what that was actually a total of one of the contracts. And so we have since then gone in and broken down the contract the way it should have been presented on the sheet. So you will see that the ending amount that City Council did approve for Phase 1, Phase 1A, and Phase 2 is $4.7 million. Phase 3 has not been, is in this upcoming budget that you'll see tomorrow, and it'll be approved when council, hopefully approved when council approves the budget. I don't have anything else unless someone has a question for me.
I've got a question.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Yes, sir.
Was a comment. This is a really good report. I like your projections that you're doing, and I really like this supplemental financial information worksheet that you worked up, especially at the bottom. The notes is something that, you know, a layman can understand. It's not just accounting mumbo jumbo. The cash, you know, definition of that, fund balance and net position. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. And of course, my door is always open, so if anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome to call me, email me, or stop by.
Thank you, Deborah. Douglas, you got procurement?
Yes. The first item is the purchase of 1,100 toter garbage cans. That will need approval at your council meeting. That's in the budget, $100,000. The public works staff is actually handling the assembly of those and the delivery of those, so it is coming in a little bit less than what we had budgeted, so that's good news. Also in your packet is a report of purchases between $10,000 and $25,000 in emergency purchases. I would call your attention to just the fact, and I think everybody is aware that we've become aware, we knew that we had rot on City Hall. We have, in addition to the rot, we have a significant termite infestation. So they are having to kind of handle this a little bit. They're kind of doing exploratory work, then tracing down the termites literally and getting them out that way and treating them along the way. So we are not positive. We think that we're kind of through the majority of the termite work and the unforeseen circumstances, but we do still have some work to go there. It is within the city's budget that was approved for this building, but it's happening a little bit untraditionally in that we're kind of doing the work as we find the termites.
Douglas, quick question. What is the, it's the rec number PO, the 25, is that the year that it was done in, or the? I'm just looking at the report. It has like 25.
Oh,
280.
rec,
Is that-
yes, far left. Yes, the first number is the year, the second number is just a,
PO number?
yeah.
Okay.
Douglas, you want to keep going? Capital
Yes.
projects?
Yes, so capital projects, the Waterway Boulevard project is now underway. Bastion Group has provided us a schedule. They are on site now. They are starting really at the 21st end of the project. Instead of kind of doing all of the demolition at one time and then all of the stormwater at one time, they're gonna move in sections. So the first section is between 21st and 24th-ish. They're going to do that section pretty well from start to finish, button it up, and then move down the street. So it's not exactly how we expected it to go, but they think it'll be it'll work better that way to do it in sections. We do have I would just mention also that they have indicated a completion date very early July, just before the 4th of July weekend. Happy that's not going well into the summer. They have also indicated that they do not expect to have to ever close the road completely. We were concerned about that, and it's always problematic. They believe that they could handle the traffic disruptions by closing individual portions of the lane and diverting traffic around the project. So that was good news to us. We are aware, we don't have the number yet, but we are aware of a conflict that there is a flood barrier wall in the 36th block of Waterway that has a conflict with a force main, and working through the Water and Sewer Commission, they don't want a large solid wall on top of their force main, so we are working with the contractor to shift the project slightly. So we are expecting a change order for that shift. That will probably will have that in time for you to consider at your council meeting. But that project is underway and progressing well. Phase 4 drainage, this is one that Deborah talked about, was the cost increased significantly from what we had in our budget. We're going to talk tomorrow about the potential of delaying that project, either phasing it or delaying it based on just budgetary needs. So we'll talk more about that one, but it really is, it's pretty well ready to go to bid, but it's just an expensive project, and we may want to consider delaying that one.
Douglas, I'm
Yes.
sorry, can I
Yep,
interrupt?
go ahead.
Can I go back to the multi-use path?
Sure.
Just have a question. I
Sure.
was down in Jupiter this past weekend, and they had an 8-foot sidewalk, which looked awesome, by the way.
Yep.
It was really for golf carts, so it got me thinking. And they had all this drainage. What are we doing for drainage on that 8-foot?
So there are portions of this project that do include, where we had problematic areas.
Right,
There
that's what I'm
are
thinking.
new
Yeah.
drainage systems along the way specifically to address those problems.
Okay.
One is right at Whispering Palms Court. There's one, there's two more large
Sparrow.
ones.
Sparrow is one.
Sparrow, and then there's one kind of in the middle, Steve Hood's house, 32nd-ish.
Okay.
So there are some major drainage improvements along the way. Most of that path has some stormwater adjacent to it that it would be, that they would.
That it can absorb?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there really is not an expected change in the stormwater patterns, but we are fixing problems that we knew pre-existed to deal with that. We did have, there was significant complications when we were elevating the path, because we were catching water. Not only were we keeping floodwater out, but that was all dealt, when we shifted it out to the golf course, that made the stormwater part of this phase simpler, because we dealt with it all out at the golf course level.
And then the 8-foot path, which is a multi-use.
Yep.
Is that intended for golf carts also? Is that why it's
That-
8 foot?
There is not a change in the use of that path. Chief, I can't recall if you can use it now for golf courts or not. People do it. I don't know if it's official.
I'm not saying it should, I'm just asking if that was the intent of the 8-foot.
No, there was no intended change in the use, and I think that you are not supposed to drive on it now. People do. I don't know that we forcibly get people off on golf carts, but it's not intended to change from how it has always been used.
It's not intended to be a golf cart path.
That's correct.
It's very, 8 foot is very tempting for, I'm just saying,
It's just
so I
like-
have to be careful, that's all.
Well, it's just like the one in Wild Dunes, right? Isn't that, or is that one 6?
It's not a.
That's not. I mean, they have, but they have signs that say they're golf carts.
Douglas, in the golf cart path, treated the same way as with, that path, as far as golf carts using it, is the same thing. The rules have to go by, like you can't ride on a golf cart on a sidewalk.
Yes,
It
that's
should be
correct.
the same thing.
That's correct, isn't it, Chief? Unless we designate it.
By
as such.
ordinance, we can designate a golf cart path like we have in other areas.
Right.
That's the only exception. So as of this moment, it does not qualify.
Right.
Okay, we may have to.
It's just like a sidewalk.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But I didn't intend to go down the golf cart thing. I intended to, did we look at pervious surface rather than impervious, the concrete versus?
Not really, and we do hear that it's double or triple the cost to do it. So it was not something that we felt like that we would get the bang for the buck, that we'd be better off spending that money to provide new drainage inlets.
It's also not as good for pedestrians and bikes, because the pervious does have,
Kind of Rice Krispie
Hits. Yeah.
type.
Just looking for ways to cut
Yep,
down.
yep. Next on the agenda is the public dock and green space. And I think this is, well, we do have an issue that went through the Public Services Committee that we'll talk about. in terms of how to pay for the green space. But the city attorney and his firm they are working on lease amendments. Those lease amendments will work through the Public Facilities Committee. And so that work is forthcoming.
That's tied in with 9A, if you want to just.
Yes, yes, so
Just for
we'll
the-
hold that conversation.
Yeah.
And
Same-
tomorrow, a little bit with the
Right.
budget, yeah. Sorry, Douglas.
So same issue with the marina dredging. And I don't know, Joshua, if you have the ability to, and you all haven't seen this at the full committee, but we do have basically two different options that the city could use for dredging the city marina. We had always talked about dredging this marina at the same time that all of the neighbors did the work, so we would be saving in mobilization. In theory, we would potentially be simplifying the project to only have one dredging project and not two sequential dredging projects. As we've worked more through this project, and you'll recall, we had some Goat Island residents approach council. That led us to having a conversation with the Army Corps of Engineers about the feasibility of using their spoil site, which they don't like to call it that, but their site that's underneath the connector that they have just emptied out with part of their projects. And the Army Corps has indicated a willingness to accept, because the city's amount is so small, it's roughly 25,000 cubic yards. The Army Corps has expressed a willingness to accept the city spoils if we do it alone, but they don't have the capacity to cooperate if we were to go at it with all of our neighbors. So we worked with ATM and we worked with a dredger that we think could be qualified to do this work to kind of do a cost-benefit analysis of the two different paths. And they've provided information back to us, and I think the Public Services and Facilities Committee is recommending that the city consider breaking free of those other neighbors and doing it by ourselves. At the end of the day, there wasn't a huge financial incentive to do it together. Unlike the beach mobilizations that we're so used to, this is a much smaller operation. It's a $175,000 worth of mobilization instead of the millions that it costs with the beach. So that has the benefit of, it doesn't save a tremendous amount to raft the projects together. The other complication that those adjacent owners have is their spoil site is not prepared to accept the material. So there is a certain amount of repair work that will have to be done. They're also still waiting for permits. They have theories about when that'll happen. They then would have to make the repairs. They then would have to go adjacent to Goat Island. So for a series of reasons, that committee is recommending that the city go at it alone. But I would expect for this issue to come to council for direction from the full council. And we'll put that on the agenda for your meeting. Any questions on that? I feel like I kind of went through it in a rush. I don't know. There's a lot of moving pieces there.
Is the amount of the savings amount, that you just said it's very small, is that in our packet?
The
I was
email,
trying to
I don't think
remember
the
the
email from the
number, but-
dredger is in your packet, but it's $175,000 mobilization.
But like, the savings, if we go with them, is like,
It was
it's like,
peanuts. It was,
5,000
because
or less than that
we
or
were
something?
20,000 of a 125,000 cubic yard project with them, so we were less than 20% of it.
Yeah.
And
It was very-
we would have saved, and the risk was going to be.
and it wasn't it wasn't really helping them either, so it was.
Yeah.
Just
Also,
adding complications and time.
Yeah, would just add that we have $1.5 million in state earmark money to do this work. We did, and through this process, got the good news that if we were to go at it alone, I think it was under 600. It was
It was 5 something.
Yeah, just under 600,000. So there will be, so we won't have to use all that money for dredging, and
We're
we're.
gonna find something to spend it on.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it was $18 a yard plus the 175.
that's correct. Yeah. It got reduced a little, I think it got reduced to 16 if we rafted with our neighbors, something like that. Beach maintenance and restoration, I feel like there's little else that we talk about at City Hall. That's obviously keeping us completely occupied with getting together easements and agreements. So that's later on our agenda, along with talking through the financing tomorrow at your workshop. So I'll save time there, and we'll hold that conversation unless anybody has any specific questions. And there's nothing to report on the final two, undergrounding power lines and Palm Boulevard bike lanes. Don't have anything to report there.
Douglas?
Yes.
Is there an update on the Army Corps cleanup on the south end?
Yes, and Robert is here and not.
I didn't know if you were going to do that or not.
Yeah, I would just say that the Army Corps is working with Aetna on their contractor on a change order to do that work. There was an amount, it sounds like the amount is beyond their scope that was in their existing contract. So they're having some contractual discussions about that now. We were out, the staff was out, and Robert was out this morning. There are two very dense pockets of muddy material. We think those dense pockets are breaking up and contributing more to the rollers that are spread out down there. So we do think that it would be prudent for the city to initiate just a quick project to get, because and I would say that the two pockets are probably, the really dense sections are probably less than the open area here on our floor. But that's just going to continue to, we think, cause problems. So
Are you
we
talking
have-
about the canal, or the mud sections, or the actual mud balls? Because
The
those go
mud-
for blocks.
Yeah, the mud the kind of, and I don't know what you would call that, a
Those
plate
mud
of
channels?
solid.
Yeah, those are a lot bigger than here.
Yeah, there's solid mud. You have the rollers, and then you have chunks of solid mud that are probably, what, a pickleball court?
There's a good portion, I would say, they're probably as big as this room.
And there's two of
Two or
them.
three sections, but then you also have those rollers up and down the beach that are, they're breaking up a little bit. So the plan was to get those big, heavy pockets out of there and then also scrape a lot of the little stuff. To me, it looks like it's getting better. I was out there like a week ago and it looked terrible. So fingers crossed. But I think by reducing those big pockets, it should dissipate a lot faster.
Yeah, and I think that our plan is it would be a matter of 3 or 4 hours to get 80 to 90% of the big chunks that are there, so.
Are we talking to DHEC about this? Because, I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm in a little bit of a different spot than you all are, because first of all, there were bucket loads, tractor bucket loads that were just put on below the water line. So there's a bunch of clay deposit below the water line. Those mud balls that are on that 3 or 4 block area, I think those are supposed to be, I don't know, what are you talking about? Just scraping them up, or?
So we're not gonna the city is not gonna address
The
all
mud
of the
balls.
roller, all of the small rollers. We are, Aetna and the Army Corps has indicated that they would do that. We think that in a matter of a few hours, we could take up and remove and deal with a large chunk of the problem. So we are planning to do that
You're just talking about
tomorrow.
those little piles of mud you're talking about? You're gonna pick those up?
No, not, they're,
I mean,
not little pot, they
I
are
know,
the
I was out
big-
there, I was out there today, yeah. I mean, I got pictures of them, but they're.
Joshua, you don't have do you have a photo? So, we're flying drones over it every few days, kind of taking inventory of the size of them. And you don't happen to have your, today's were yours. Can you put up last week's? Yeah, they appear to be getting smaller, but I think
No,
there's
you're talking
also.
about the mud, yeah, never mind. Let's see what the pictures show. I'm just trying to figure out what it is we're cleaning up and if it's really gonna make a dent in the issue down there.
Yeah, it's several, we think it's several dump trucks full.
Yeah, and I thought DHEC was on top of this,
Yeah.
and they were pushing the remediation on this.
Yeah, that I do not know.
Is there a
Yeah,
safety
VES,
concern?
I should say, yeah.
I mean, we got mud, we got, I call them moon balls. There, it looks like at the lunar surface. I mean, is there a safety concern that we need to be?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing's been
We have
tested.
been-
I mean, there's yellow, there's like, there's all kind of discolorization down there on the beach. And I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, not at all.
You're
Yeah,
being,
I was just going out there
sorry.
cleaning
No, I know
up.
you were. Yeah. This is nothing on you, okay? I just think we've got an issue down there that needs to be assessed professionally, and the cleanup needs to be done professionally, and it needs to be done in association with DES compliance, because they violated the permit on what they were supposed to put as far as the material down there. So that's not the picture I saw this morning. But,
That's what I want.
where is that?
And Douglas, DES is involved. I mean, they're with the
Yeah.
Army Corps.
Yeah, I don't
Not the
think
city.
that,
Yeah,
I
you're
think
talking about
that's-
those couple of spots, right? Yeah,
Just, I mean, these,
yeah, that's,
like heavy concentrations of clay.
yeah, and each of those is probably the size of this room, Robert.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're dense and they're clearly breaking up, and the rollers are,
they're on the right there.
yeah. and
They go
they're-
for
they're-
blocks,
It
yeah.
appears that those rollers are breaking off of that dense kind of section of stuff. So the more those stay out there, the worse it is, I think, for the area.
Excuse me,
Bless you.
sorry.
But there's not there's DES, there's not a strict deadline that I'm aware of. They have,
How does this impact the renourishment? Are we
I
going to
don't
put good
think-
sand over this kind of stuff, or what's the plan, or do we have a plan?
I think the plan is for us to pick up the big stuff that we can as quickly as we can, and then Otten and the Army Corps pick up the rest. That, all of that work would be done, yeah, there's a good.
Before
All of that work would be
renourishment.
done before the renourishment.
So there is a plan. There definitely is a
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, that's a, stop right there, Joshua.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah, that's the, so
Yeah.
we think that in a few hours, a dump truck and an excavator can get a large majority of that material off. Now, that's not going to address there's rollers, there's silt for several blocks. We're not going to
That'll
address
give you a good
that.
size of the scale if that's somebody standing there. That's a
Pretty big.
That's Josh.
Yeah, that's,
that's a pretty good size. Okay, all right.
It's pretty big.
so that's planned, I think, for tomorrow?
If they can mobilize tomorrow, they'll be there. We're working with the tides also. Latest would be the following.
Where are we depositing all that?
So that is getting hauled off to
Off-
Hugie.
Off-site.
Yeah, also.
Douglas, what else? Is that it for projects?
Yep, that's it for
Okay.
projects on the whole business.
So old business and new business, there are a number of items that feed into our budget conversation for tomorrow, but we may can set some, at least foundation for a couple of these pieces. First one is discussion on marina parking lot lease amendments. Douglas, you mind just level setting, then we can,
Yep.
we'll have this
So-
conversation
So this is
tomorrow.
one that is, as we mentioned, it's kind of in flight now. The part that the city attorney will need direction on specifically is a recommendation from the Public Services and Facilities Committee. We have currently in our budget $500,000 to do the improvements at that parking lot. The Public Services and Facilities Committee is recommending that instead of the city managing and bidding that project, that the restaurant tenants handle that project, and that in exchange for that, 2 years of additional rent, is that what we call it?
Overages.
Overages
Is what we're
is
calling it.
forgiven. So that would need to be worked through into their lease. We'd have to come to that agreement, and that's a recommendation to this group, to full council.
So no matter what the project cost, we're going to give 2 years' worth of abatement?
Well, so currently, and we do have, I guess I would back up and say that we do have a plan. We've been talking to Matt Klein, who did that conceptual plan. We don't have a detailed engineering plan, but I think before we did this project, we would have a detailed set of plans. Right now, we have very much a conceptual price, but the point was made, when we have a conceptual price, it's usually low, and prices usually go up from there. So we don't have kind of a firm number, but we are working with a placeholder number of $500,000.
And that's parking lot, not the green space of any kind, right?
Well, and we've talked also about the fact that currently the green space, as it's shown on that plan, is really only a handful of palm trees, sod, and maybe some picnic benches. So it's-
Picnic, kayak storage. Yeah, I mean, there's some pieces.
So if the green space was to stay at that level of simplicity, I think the $500,000 budget would accomplish that. If there was going to be, or if council wanted to do something above and beyond that, I don't think that would be included in the estimate that we've gotten so far.
But the contemplation was that the restaurant would do the whole thing, including the green space.
David?
What would 2 years of overages be estimated at?
Around the same thing, about
Is it-
515-ish.
Yeah, it seems like it's 260,
I mean, that's what it's
Right
been,
at
that's what it was
260.
last year.
It was really close.
Yeah, so it would, mathematically, it should be close.
But, I mean, that's assuming the revenue stays flat.
Assuming no growth.
So this is a bartering transaction, is what this says. And where did this come from?
It came from Public Services Committee, and we have had challenges with projects at the marina in terms of timing. I think it would help if they were in control of the timing. I think there's also the sentiment that it could be done more efficiently if it weren't a city project, that we may not get.
But it's on city property.
It's the same way that the restaurant, it's basically the same way that the restaurant was done, it's the same way that the marina was done.
It's a bartering transaction. In my experience, in bartering transactions, it's never equal. Cash is always king. It's somebody wins and somebody loses. Even if it's the smallest amount, it leaves us open for questioning about the whole transaction. I don't like bartering.
And Deborah Douglas, for our draft budget tomorrow, I think it's still in as a city expense for $500,000, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think before we
Just for a
changed.
discussion item,
Yeah, before we change the budget, we wanted direction from council, and we can talk about that.
Well, I might be the only one that's not in favor of it, but that's my position.
I think you'll have company. Next item also is for discussion tomorrow. Last time, we had looked at a debt service schedule. Scott, I think you had asked for, let's look at it from a resident viewpoint. So this is out through 2038. If you finance $5 million, if you financed an additional 4 for the sand retention methods, if you finance 10, and if you finance 4. Tomorrow's budget that you're going to look at in the draft that you have has us paying cash for the beach. I don't know about the 4 million, but definitely for the beach project. But this is what it would look like at a resident level. Deborah, I don't know, or Douglas, if y'all want to, we can spend time on this tomorrow or now, either one.
Did we see, oh no.
Go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
I thought we'd seen this one last, or the total dollars we did.
Yeah, the main addition here is it's adding, you all asked to see when bonds
other ones come off.
expired and
off.
when they rolled
Yeah.
off, so it kind of shows what would happen to an individual.
So Scott, I see 2028 is when the last real big
Rolls
piece rolls off. Public safety building.
This one is new because both Councilman Bogosian and Councilman Pierce asked that we show it from a resident perspective. So that's what this does, per million. assessed value.
More on that tomorrow?
I think so.
Yep.
Update on beach renourishment easements. We are compiling those now. Our goal is to have them completely compiled and mailed out the very early part of next week. We are still waiting. Each of these has an individual exhibit. We're still waiting on some of those. We have the majority of those. So we're getting very close to being able to put those out. We are trying to be sure that we have contact information for everybody. We obviously have mailing addresses from the tax rolls, but we have found most effective to communicate via email and people, just to have people aware, thinking of it, and checking their mail. So we're trying to get in contact with everybody via email now to just get people prepared for that. So that again will be really starting in earnest early part of next week. We also have a meeting similar to what we've done in the past, where we will have the city staff along with the city attorney and Stephen to just walk through the project, the easement, and answer any questions, and hopefully start to get some of the easements signed. Update on the escrow agreement with Wild Dunes Community Association. We did get what we were calling our final draft to them. We got red lines back, I think, yesterday, late last night. So they were quick in turning around their comments. We are having our attorneys look at that. We're also looking at it from just kind of a feasibility perspective. So we're going through those, and we'll have something to report back very soon. New business, discussion of education and certification incentives.
Yeah, a couple of these will have tomorrow implications as well, but
Yep.
go ahead. The incentives is in your packet.
Yes, both chiefs have worked on both education and certification incentives. Those are in your packet. I know they'd be happy to answer questions if you will want to get into that now, or if you want to hold it tomorrow, either.
Just one real quick question. I know it's late. Why is there a ceiling on incentives? I mean, after you get to a certain point, I think it's 10,000 or something, that you can't earn any more, no matter how qualified. What is the thinking behind that?
I think that is borrowed from one of our neighbors.
Yes, sir, that's a standard practice from the two agencies we looked at. One is at 10,000, one is at 14,500.
Thank you.
So just budgetary item more than anything, probably. Other questions on that specifically before? Go ahead, John.
Yours, at least, Chief, Cornett, has, the payment would be in terms of step progression, right? Additional steps for different qualifications?
No, sir.
Yeah, I will say, since the last time we looked at this, the two chiefs have gotten together to try, because they did have very different methodologies of really kind of getting to the same place, to try to get a more uniformed procedure and policy. They worked together last week in trying to kind of work out a similar program that would work for both departments.
I mean, if we're going to cover it tomorrow, we can cover it, but I was just looking at it, and it shows that the IOP's public safety recommended incentive added steps for sworn officers. For associate's degree, it's 2 steps, bachelor, 4 steps, master's, 6 steps, PhD, 8 steps.
That's correct. Yes, sir. So it's two different things. The education incentives, we looked at as a percentage for the general government, which a third of my department falls under general government, so we wanted to include them.
Okay.
And then the steps for those that are on the police or fire that are sworn or certified firefighters for the education. And then for the advanced certification, it's a payout, essentially one time a year or biannually, however the city chose to do that, based on those certifications with a max hitting the limit. And just to let you know, Councilman Ward, I didn't have anybody that came close to maxing out at 10 on my list.
And Chief, that comment's true of both the certifications are one-time payments? for
One-time
staff?
annual payments, yes, sir.
So they're one-time payments, but the education is ongoing because of the, and that's what I think really has to be integrated into the whole the step, we were talking about steps earlier. I mean, this could magnify that problem, so
Yeah,
it's
I
just
mean-
got to be coordinated.
You go PhD and I'm
Yeah.
at 25
Yeah.
fairly quickly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's got to be factored in when the whole compensation study is looked at.
Wait, so these incentives are one and done?
So the education would move your, it wouldn't be one and done. Your education would be moving you by step, and then your incentive would be each year, as long as you have maintained them. The benefit of these are, it makes sure you're doing it and it's competitive. If you look on the list for the PD, there's only 3 for most of these things, and if you're just not meeting muster on it, then there's somebody waiting behind you that wants that money, and we'll move them into that spot. So it helps us be competitive, too.
But as long as you keep it,
You get it every year.
okay.
Chief O.
Yeah, Chief and I worked on it, and we can clarify more tomorrow. I know it's late, so different agencies do it differently in fire, so it goes on the hourly rate, for example. And other agencies, like, Chief Cordette mentioned, it's a one-time payment or paid quarterly or paid biannually, but there's multiple ways to do it, so.
And chiefs, I know you were looking at I guess you looked at Mount P and Charleston, right? Or the 2 agencies you looked at? I mean, or is anybody doing?
St. John's.
Yes, sir. St. John's, Mount Pleasant, and the City of Charleston were used in this,
Got it.
in our methodology.
So I know this is incentive-based, either education or certification, but are people out there are they doing housing allowances of any kind or stipends around that, or is that not a thing? Chief
Not to my
says
knowledge.
yes, yeah.
Not to my knowledge,
Maybe
for a
on the-
housing stipend for
Yeah,
fire.
for fire.
In law enforcement, it is becoming more custom for people who live in your community, that they get a stipend for living in your community. It benefits the community when we can keep the police
on
there
site,
and have
yeah.
the visible cars. Might be a little more complicated for us here, but yes, some agencies, that is, and it's a great incentive to keep your folks living in the community.
Unless we build something, chief.
Correct, which is a conversation we've had, and I'd love to explore further about how we can work on workforce housing, but I don't think that's something we will accomplish in this
Tonight?
budget cycle, but I am committed to have
Yeah.
that conversation with you whenever you want.
But you are seeing it,
Yes, sir.
but you're seeing it when somebody lives in the community.
Yes, sir. It's typically, and most of it's not a lot, but they want to incentivize something for living in the community that
Yeah.
you're policing in.
But Chief O, not so much on the fire side.
Obviously, the values there, you become more ingrained in the community.
No, I just mean a
but you
stipend
don't- You
of
don't really see,
housing. Okay.
on the fire side. I have seen relocation expenses for people for coming out of state to help them with housing.
On a
because-
higher, yeah.
Right, because you have to have 3 months of income to rent, and some of our people have struggled with that, to show that to the property management company. And that's a big ask, to show, hey, here's 3 months of income, your first and last months, and then security. So that's a valuable thing, of course, for all our city employees, for sure.
Thank you. Douglas, city attorney letter of engagement?
Yep. This is city attorneys adjusting their rates. They are currently capped an hourly rate at $2.95. They've indicated that firm-wide, that has gone, apparently we skipped either a year or 2 years, but that has now gone to $3.25 per hour. I wouldn't expect, I don't think that there needs to be a council action on this unless you will tell me otherwise, but I just wanted you all to be aware of that change going forward. The other thing is also just for future discussion. We have had it in our program to hire a beach resilience officer. We've started down the process of writing that job description, going through the admin committee to get that approved, and we have put a pause on that to allow us to have the conversations about the potential to add police officers in lieu of. So I just wanted the council to be aware that that process is underway, but it's stalled a bit to allow you to weigh in on, do we want to move forward with, and I think in the budget, we have all three positions, two police officers and a resilience officer, but you all will need to give direction how you want to proceed with that. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Douglas. Legislative report, not much there. House started budget conversations today. Senate will start shortly, so we've got our request in and keeping our fingers crossed, see what happens. There being no further, Bev, I'm sorry. There being no further business?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Off record at 7:39.